All right, now we come to our work session, and I'd like to welcome the co-chairs of the ESOL committee. Thank you for joining us all this evening. And now, Dr. Schiller, I will pass it over to you.
To bring to us a very important report. I understand it's been a period of time that we've wanted to pull it together, and I'm very happy. So, we've had a chance to chat earlier. I've enjoyed chatting. Forward to hearing from your report now.
Good evening. This is Janet Walters-Marquez, and I am Claudia Wierzbicki, chairs of the ESOL Advisory Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present the findings and the ESOL Advisory Committee main recommendation based on the headcount evaluation of the ESOL. One of the findings is audit found shortcomings in training, co-planning, parent outreach, student intake, and student placement. Some examples to supporting this finding are: school provides special training to designated ESOL teachers, but unfortunately not to other general education teachers who work with ESOL students. The school does not provide time in the academic schedule to support co-planning time for classroom teachers and ESOL teachers. The school has no identification process in place for new students with limited or interrupted formal education. The school has no system in place to differentiate ESOL instruction by native language, formal education background, and time and country. Last year, the school established the language line. The service needs to be improved. The fact is that parents' participation remains low. The outreach to ESOL families needs to be improved. Therefore, the ESOL Advisory Committee recommends hire a full-time ESOL coordinator with expertise in teaching English as a second language, funding of ESOL training for all teachers who are working with ESOL students, assign a staff member to explore local and state-level grants to support the ESOL program. The ESOL coordinator can address most of these deficiencies. The responsibilities of an ESOL coordinator should include the following duties, among others: being a resource guide for the ESOL program, ESOL parents and their children, administer entrance examination with interviewing ESOL parents and students and evaluation of credentials, identification of ESOL students to enter and exit the program, support monitored students, apply for grants to support the ESOL program, coordinate the ESOL training, and increase ESOL parents and students' participation in school activities.
Talking about the ESOL coordinator, question that was asked during our meeting was, why not have coordinators for all the groups? But in Foster City, there are only 3 special groups: the students with disabilities, and they have a coordinator, and the other special group is the gifted and talented. And even though there's not a gifted and talented coordinator for K to 12, there's a full-time IB coordinator who is the gifted and talented coordinator for the high school. And I don't know, but in the past, we have had MPY coordinators and all that. These programs require outreach to parents. And to the question of Mr. Lawrence, who asked, why can't the ESOL Advisory Committee do this outreach? We have tried to do outreach, but because we don't work for the school system, the information of students and parents is private and is not provided to us. So when we do outreach, like we did at the Berman building, instead of going to a targeted outreach and knock at the doors of the parents who are part of the system, we spent 4 hours knocking at everybody's door to see if there was somebody who was part of the program. So what it means is that because of privacy laws, the school needs to do this. And so I just went to a party on Saturday and happened to meet somebody who used to be an ESOL full-time coordinator for the City of Falls Church. I did not know that in the past we had this position. It has been eliminated and not reinstated. So we have numerous deficiencies that somebody who understands ESOL, understand the program, understand grants. There was an opportunity like 10 years ago of $50,000 to put a room and to coordinate the ESOL program, but I found it, but nobody was looking because nobody has time to look for the things that are out there, federal funds, state funds for the program. So we are advocating that the school board seriously consider hiring an ESOL teacher, coordinator, with an expertise, not somebody to coordinate the program, somebody who has an expertise in the ESOL program. TESOL, they call it TESOL, Teaching English as a Second Language. So the second we are not giving you, we don't have time to give you the whole report. When we read the report, there's numerous deficiencies, so we decided to only provide priorities for the advisory committee. And the second was, I want to read it for you. It says, finding at page 3, federal guidelines prohibit unnecessary segregation of English learners from non-English learners. MEH appears to group level 1 and 2 English learners, students without disabilities, with students with disabilities, because of the sense that these students have shared academic needs. The audit recommendation was the Falls Church should ensure that all schools do not group students with special needs together, isolating them from other students in the general student population merely because these students can be categorized as English learner or students with disability. We discussed this in a meeting, and we were provided assurances that this is not happening. However, as a recommendation, we think that we cannot have a verbal assurance versus finding on an audit that says that we have. It doesn't say that we have this problem. It says that it appears that we have this problem. It appears that we're violating federal guidelines. So our suggestion is that the school should do an investigation, especially at MEH, talk with personnel, write a short report addressing this finding. Make sure that first they understand the implications, what is segregation, look at the school, look at the different classrooms. It was at MEH. Make sure that this is not happening. If it's happening, stop the practice, and then write a report, not to us, but to the board. They talk to the principal, the teachers, include the names of persons interviewed, dates and findings, to make sure that what appeared to be a violation of federal guidelines is not happening in Foster City. This is important because 10 years ago, MEH was doing that. And I remember that, and we have a school board liaison that was Ms. Aguilera, and at the meeting when she heard it, she just told them to stop it. So it is because when you don't have resources, suddenly you begin to do things and maybe, it says appears, maybe this is happening. So that is an important finding that could be addressed easily and doesn't cost any money, and I hope that is done immediately. The third one that we want to discuss is we have been discussing this staff. Last year, we presented before the board, we said that GM was understaffed. Well, we have a finding that GM was understaffed. That now we know that 38 students with 1 teacher is insufficient. The reality is that we know that 18 to 1 is more or less the kind of number that we're looking for. So finding number one, at page 4, Falls Church is short-staffed and does not have the correct student-teacher ratios to provide high-quality ESOL instruction. We provide ESOL instruction. We meet minimum standards. The question is, are we providing quality instruction? And so for these, another thing that we're doing because of the crunch on the staff is that we have transitioned for high-quality services, which are what they call pull-out instruction, content classes, which means world civilization, English second language. So you are teaching at the same time world civilization, but you're explaining different terms and concepts to the kids at the same time, English concepts. And the teachers have always asked for more of that. The strategic plan the strategic plan that ended in 2015, which was done by the advisory committee, asked for more of that. So the teachers, the strategic plan, but we're moving out of that because we don't have staff. And so we need to first, especially at the high school, determine what kind of program we're going to offer, what is the guarantee for students at different levels, and then staff it accordingly. And even if what we decide is a minimum level, it should not be changing year by year because we have more students. It's difficult to react to this increase in population. But in other counties, they say, if you're level 1 and 2, we're going to provide you 2 hours or 2 sessions of English every day, and then we may support you in social sciences or sciences. And so we need to have a plan, a program for level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, and 5, and staff it accordingly. That's what we have to do. And even if we go at the minimum, but we have to put a minimum and staff it accordingly, because what could be happening is that kids, and in the report says some kids are not getting services. Kids that are supposed to be getting services are not getting services. So it also says that George Mason faces obstacles in supporting older newcomers to reach on-time graduation. So sometimes George Mason gets kids that are older, and you know, that in terms of and they're also at level 1 and 2, which is they are at the initial levels of English, and it's difficult to support them to graduate in time. Also, it says, and this is good and bad, we are putting more effort in preparing the kids for standardized tests. We had a year in which it was just, the numbers were terrible, especially at TJ, at 38%. We're increasing, we're like at 56. We're under Virginia average for ESOL students, but we're moving in the right direction. Part of it is that we're putting time, which other schools do, in preparing kids for standardized tests, but the report says that then we're not focusing on ESOL instruction because we're putting the time for teach for SOL testing. So sorry, do you want to?
For the SOL testing, I just would like to add that the same thing that the SOLs, for the ESOL group, we are just reaching or we are performing under
Another thing is that it says upon exit from ESOL services, and this is after level 5, Falls Church has not clearly defined the continuing linguistic services or academic support that they're going to provide for exited students. In a sense, again, we don't have a plan. And at least, it's not that we don't have a plan. We may have a plan, they did not see the plan, it's not written any place, it's not clear. And what is interesting is that most services are provided for level 1 to 3, but when you are in level 4, 5, or exit, you may need services. And because they put you in world civilization, science classes without support, and you're still dealing with the language. And we, last year, one teacher, 38 students, she could not support the kids. In the high school, it was very interesting because last year we had 38 kids that were provided services, and this year we have 18. And I'm a numbers person, I just don't know how you move from 38 to 18 without graduating them. So we learned in a meeting that there were 12 that left the system, and because we don't have a coordinator, nobody knows at this point. Some people, we will learn that they transfer to other schools. Within the year, the school will get that information. We hope that we know what happened with all these students, but it's good to have an exit strategy to understand why of 38, or maybe, I don't know, when they say 12 left, I don't know what was the number that we're talking about. It could be that it's 38 that received services and maybe 60 in the school and 12 left. But that's a lot of kids that left from a group, and we don't know why they left. And some people may have transferred to another jurisdiction, state. They may have gone abroad, but you need somebody who tells you why these kids are leaving. So it is important for us to add resources to the foster system. In this year, the school that really needs resources is Thomas Jefferson. And what they have done, the school, they have dealt with the problem in a very good way for a short period of time, in my opinion. They have a teacher from the middle school working half-time in TJ and half-time at Mary Ellen Henderson, and a teacher from Mount Daniel working 2 hours at TJ and the rest at Mount Daniel. Our suggestion is to send the teacher from Mount Daniel back to Mount Daniel, the teacher from Mary Ellen Henderson back to Mary Ellen Henderson, and hire a full-time teacher for TJ. That's our recommendation. And it's not only my recommendation, the recommendation from the committee is that we need to hire 2 more teachers, hire 2 additional ESOL teachers starting this year, which I know that we're, and one for George Mason High School and another for Thomas Jefferson Elementary School. Again, even though we have 18 students receiving service at the high school, that doesn't mean that there's not another group that could receive services that we're not providing at the high school, and that they need to.
Wanted to add, one of the findings on was for the monitored students, that the school has not clearly defined the service or academic support. That there are cases where exited adequate academic support. I think it's really important also to take in account the monitored students and level 1 to 3, which really need support, but the same 1, 5, and then the monitors are now for 2 years. They also need support.
So let me summarize what I was trying to say. First, we would like the school to, and it's presented in the report, to do more content classes in the especially in the high school. And George Mason has changed the emphasis from content classes to what they call push in. That means that sometimes somebody goes and help them in a classroom with general population. But for some classes, it's good to have content classes. We also like the school to have a document telling the public, explaining the program it provides to the different levels of ESOL. Just like Arlington, okay. You're level 1, you're in 9th grade, level 1, we're going to provide you 2 hours or 2 periods of English and support in social studies or science, or no support. It is very important, even if we are not providing a high-quality program, that people know what kind of program we're providing. Because I meet people all the time, and they feel that they're in Foster City, and I meet English second language people in the program, and they feel that they're in Foster City and their kids are getting a high level of education. So at least we can tell people what kind of program we have, and they can compare with other jurisdictions and make their own informed decision. And so I think just having it clear, whatever we're providing, it is for benefit of the public. I don't have, do you have any questions?
First of all, thank you very much, Claudia and Jeanette. Appreciate your coming here and sharing your thoughts with us. At this point, we could open it up for questions, but perhaps the thing to do, first of all, would be to ask Dr. Schiller and his team, what are your thoughts about some of the challenges we face? I think one of the big challenges we seem to face is allocating resources in buildings in the face of changing demographics from year to year. Student populations change, and so what are some of your another thought that occurs to me, could somebody discharge both the ESOL coordinator duties as well as provide additional assistance, instructional assistance? What are some of the ways that we can find creative ways to address this as comprehensively as possible?
Ask the board's indulgence to allow the staff to digest this report and respond on point to each of the recommendations, so that we can then have a very informed discussion as to each of the recommendations and how in which we can better respond to the recommendations to assure the services and the programs. And I think that we could then look at all of the implications more thoroughly. Clearly, as I've been meeting with all the support groups, and next week we're going to be working at our workshop exclusively on staffing needs in the district, that given the thoroughness of this report, it'll allow us to place before the board all the needs that we have district-wide. ESOL needs, special education needs, additional teachers for enrollment increases, and we're going to be inviting the principals to be here to be able to share with the board what they've shared with me. And the board's going to be faced with a very difficult task to sort through many competing needs, all of which have great value. All of which have great value. And certainly all of which have need to be filled. And it's going to have to then balance it with a very limited budget guidance from the city in terms of how much new funds can be available to absorb the increase of our enrollments and to meet all the needs. As I explained today to numerous support groups and PTA leaders, that just moving forward with no increases of staffing, no increases for salaries. We know we need almost $900,000 next year just to maintain the fixed costs of benefits and support of the staff. Given the city's guidance, that leaves us with less than $400,000 to meet all needs, unless the city is able to generate revenues. The board has directed me and staff to bring to them, based on their priorities, to look at the needs of our district and to quantify what each of the needs would cost. well above what we have as guidance from the city of available monies. I would bring to this board next Tuesday night at our workshop, as quickly as we can analyze this and put a cost figure to it of these needs so that the board can look at its priorities and look at the tough decisions to see. And we stand ready to advise the board and recommend to the board how perhaps to go forward. So I would say, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, that the value of this report is very timely. Not only does it give us a pathway forward of things that staff can look at to address and to see how we improve, and we should note here that this report, as thorough as it is, does indicate that the program that's being offered now is one of quality and one meeting all the mandates requirements. Notwithstanding the fact that we always look for ways to improve our delivery of programs and our staffing and our training of our people, and this report will give to us that roadmap of how to do it. So, ladies, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, we will add all that we can cull out of this for your budget consideration next week and in January. And we'll go down the track of not only the budget implications, but what we can do to analyze each of these recommendations and how we can respond to them with regard to improving delivery of services, professional development, in every aspect, because this program, like all the other programs in your school district, of all of them, we need to be able to serve all of these students in the most effective and thorough fashion possible. It's going to be a difficult budget year, but the needs of this district have to be paramount in everyone's mind.
I just want to remind the school board that I believe it was one of the last meetings in September. Jeannie and I did present this report as well and included all the recommendations and how we're addressing some of the recommendations that are in there. So that's a PowerPoint that you have from the end of September. That's something that we will share with Dr. Schiller as well when we're having our meeting. But that's something that you should have access as well. If you need us to resend it, we can do that as well.
All right, thank you, Ms. High. Shall we open it up for questions? Mr. Reidinger?
Hopefully folks can hear me. I think my questions are more towards the school system as opposed to the presentation. One of the elements that came out is that there was an ESOL coordinator at one point. I think that probably happened before I was on the board. Kind of curious as to when the ESOL coordinator position.
It's prior to my 10 years, so I don't know. You've been here for 12 years. And I believe at that time she was part-time teaching and part-time coordinating the program, but I'd have to go back and make sure that we're talking about the same person that I'm thinking. Yeah, Rosetta, yeah. I'd have to go back and look. I mean, she retired before so I'd have to go back. Yeah, I forgot the man who has all the history.
I've been here forever. And if memory serves me correctly, at that time, it was either an extra pay for extra duty stipend, or it was some, like a .2 release time. I'm not sure which one, but that's generally how we compensated and recognized those leadership roles.
And if that's the case, we currently have extra pay for extra duty. We have a K-5 and a 612, if that's the case now, which happen to be our teachers, two of our teachers who are serving in that.
Seems to me that there are perhaps three, maybe more buckets here. You know, there's the things that are resource constrained and resource driven, like you need actual money to hire a new ESOL coordinator, and money will be extremely tight. But it would be, I would like to see, you know, as a recommendation, that listed as an option budget in terms of what it would cost. So we can consider that and weigh it, as you said, Dr. Schiller, with regard to other needs. The other things are, Ms. High, if you could recirculate the material that I remember we looked at the number of students as against the planning factors and against other jurisdictions, but I actually, for some reason, cannot pull that up.
It was the late night after the principal marathon of the technology report, and we said we would do it in less than 10 minutes, and we did, so that might be,
would
that
be-
might be why.
It would be good to recirculate that.
We'll
so
be
that
happy
I
to.
could
We'll be
use a
happy to.
larger portion of my brain in observing it.
Because I think most brain cells were gone that night.
Yeah, it would be very helpful to see us as against other jurisdictions, and that's kind of a big resource piece. But there's also the bucket of, are there any things that we need to do in terms of changing policy, and are there any things that we need to do in terms of changing practice? It's sort of, I don't want to say we need to do more specifically until I actually look back and, having heard the report from the ESOL committee, look at what all the proposals are. But it is something I think I'd like to spend a little bit more time talking about in this group once we have a chance to bring this all together. I do have one question for the two of you, and that is the specific recommendations that you made. I saw we have the actual audit report, but is there an ESOL committee report that lays out your recommendations that you would like to have considered?
No, what we did is that we summarized of all the recommendations. These are not our recommendations. This is an auditor who came and made these recommendations. And we have a priority. So when they say that there's a lot of deficiencies, and you look at the number of deficiencies in the program, then the advisory committee met, and we said, if we can have an ESOL coordinator, that person can address all these deficiencies, including training staff and help them with co-planning and all that. But we don't have, the recommendations that we mentioned here were recommendations discussed at the committee and to address all the deficiencies. So, like when they say, the report says, we need to have more staff, we're understaffed. So we look at it and we said, this year, definitely, TJ is understaffed. And the school has tried to address that, but the best way to address it is to hire a new teacher for TJ. They need a teacher. And when you look at planning factors, because I have seen the one from the school, it's very important to look at other jurisdictions. I think if you look at Fairfax, especially in the high school, their numbers are easy to understand. Sometimes the formulas are very complicated. The ones from Foster City, I don't know, they don't look like anything that is out there that I have seen. And so I have seen the ones in Arlington and the one in Fairfax. And in Arlington, there was also an audit from one organization like EdCount, and it explains, not only the teachers that they have for ESOL, but all the resources behind these teachers. They have much more than that. We know we're a small jurisdiction, but an ESOL coordinator full-time, not on collateral duties. The information that I have is that this person, at least at a point, was not doing it in collateral duties. We met, and Margaret met her at an activity. And if we had somebody in collateral duties, that's not what we need right now, because we have more than 200 kids, and you need to understand that an ESOL coordinator, when a kid graduates from the ESOL program, the parents don't graduate. So when you still need to contact the parents, and the parents they speak English as a second language still, and they need support too. I answer your question.
Is it possible to get a hard copy of your presentation to all the board members?
I have to redo it because, I'm.
Oh, if it's not too much.
I'm still working on my presentation, crossing out things.
And here,
We can put it together.
that would be great. I mean, the report is super long, and it would be nice to have a digested version of it. And you all present it so well. I'd like to see it in writing.
I think if you read page from 1 to 6, is the report.
Thank you.
For the summary of the report is pretty accurate.
Thank you.
But we will
put
give
something
you.
together.
This is more of a, thank you very much. This is really sobering. I have a question for Hunter and Lisa. If we could see the growth of the ESOL population over the past 10 to 15 years, and then per pupil spending in that program, to see how maybe that has if that has declined as we've cut resources from the program, and where we could maybe start to make some of that back up.
I mean, Hunter will have to answer about the per pupil spending, but we can definitely provide you that. And the PowerPoint does show you some trends, so I will make sure I send that out to you.
Just a couple of comments. Seems to me, Dr. Schiller's comments about the resource allocation is one thing, but I think fundamentally we clearly want to ask ourselves, what kind of program do we want in the city? Do we want to meet the minimum standards, or do we want a high-quality ESOL program? So, like Dr. Schiller said, the timing is perfect because it moves us into the budget and we put those considerations in. But it starts with what kind of program do we want to have, and that's something we have to ask ourselves. Do we just want to give them the base model, or do we want to really educate the kids and get them out? So whatever we have to do, I think is a charge that we have to take on. Thank you.
Planning factors is whatever we want them to be. The City of Falls Church has determined that in each classroom, they don't want more than 22 students or 24, and then you plan accordingly. So that formula that is in our regulations, then it goes to the planning. The thing is that we haven't determined what kind of program we want for the English as a second language students, and then based on that, plan accordingly. So it's good to compare, but it has to do with what kind of program you want for the kids. And we have determined, because we could have classroom, we can reduce the number of teachers that we need by just having classrooms of 40 kids in each classroom. And then we have half of the teachers, and our budget is reduced, but we have decided that for our general population, we don't want that kind of program. So we need to make the same decision for the English second language program.
And I agree with that, and I think all of this is very timely, but ultimately, I think where we're going to hit the challenge is what the budget guidance has been given to us, and we are asking the staff to put together a budget of needs, not necessarily wants, and this is, in my opinion, a definite need that we want to do, but it's going to be that balancing of all the other things that are going to potentially be deemed as everything else, and ultimately it's going to come down to what we are going to want to send over to the general government and what they're going to be willing to support back over to our side of the shop. It would be a much easier process if we were a taxing authority, but we are not. We just send over requests to the general government, and then we have to go to support and defend that budget request that we send to them. But we do have a school system that is built on providing not just the minimums, but a high quality education, and it's my hope that we can potentially. So even in these current challenging times that we all know we have with not only the ESOL needs, but facilities are becoming more and more of a need as well. So, but this does come to us at a very
Another aspect that I wanted just to emphasize is that there's something that doesn't cost any money, which is the little reports doing the finding that it appears that we're violating federal guidelines. That could be done quickly, and if it's being done, it should be remedied immediately.
Just a couple of questions. With respect to staffing, the report recommends staffing, relooking at staffing at George Mason, are there other specific staffing
The main
recommendations?
recommendation this year is Thomas Jefferson. The recommendation this year, you have the principal of Thomas Jefferson who came here in September, a new principal who said, the most that a principal can say, we need more resources. In a sense, I think he's very wise because he gets an SOL report of kids failing in his school, and definitely he told you that he needs more support to help kids that are failing. And so the school did something. They had the 4-hour teacher from MEH. They had it last year, so they moved another from Mount Daniel. But these are things that should be short-term remedies, and we should look at the need to staff TJ properly. And, you know, if we can help these kids at the elementary level, then it's great in middle school and high school. This is the best time to help kids.
Understood. But in the report specifically calls out the George Mason staffing level.
Yes.
Does it call out any other,
But
does it make
says-
any other
it's-
staffing
He
recommendations?
specifically talked about George Mason, but it also said that the school boards, I don't know, meets once a year and reviews staffing levels for ESOL, the ESOL program, and that they are, we're dealing with, and that's the problem, we're dealing with different populations. They're dealing with the population of last year, and at that point, the problem really was both TJ and George Mason, but especially George Mason was just 38 students receiving services and one teacher that could not provide services for all of them. And TJ this year is that they have this crunch, and it has been addressed because it's a problem. The principal said it's a problem, and the school provided some services because it is a problem. So
The report also mentioned on page 8, not only the high school, also the middle school, that the staff have been unable to provide the individualized linguistic or content support each student needs.
Right, yeah, and I understand this is a moving target, and I think that's one of our big challenges is that, you know, as I read this report, and I agree, they call out individual schools, and I think suggest there has to be a way to get some dynamic support, but that the focus there was George Mason. Now we're in this year, and we have, because of this moving target, other problems. And so I think, you know, I think another big mystery, and I fear that this isn't going to be even something that Hunter could do, but is there any way to project all enrollment? And I think the answer is probably no, but I think it is very telling that we had this big sort of trough. We had 3 or 4 years of a huge drop, almost, you know, a third drop, and now we're back up, it appears, to normal. And from a staffing standpoint, I think we are going to have to make some adjustments. And finding a way that we can do that, you know, when school starts, we're going to have to find a way to meet the needs of those students. And I guess one last question I would have is, when you say deficiencies, you're referring to the recommendations in the report, correct?
The findings.
Okay, because I did a word search, I didn't see deficiency, so I just wanted to make sure. Well, I just want to make sure that you were referring to the recommendations when you.
No, I'm referring more to the findings. The findings in the report are deficiencies. The findings are the problems that the program has. Those are the findings. All of the findings are the problems, which I call deficiencies. All deficiencies someplace in the report.
Okay. Well, as I said, as I am fond of saying, my children have 2 grandparents who were English language learners. They came to the United States basically not speaking English. And so this is an extremely important area and one that we need to do well on. One of the things we haven't touched on is I don't know what role technology can play, high C. That's sort of the non-cost, as Mr. Reidinger referred to, as an element of that. Finding creative ways to be nimble and to load balance among teaching loads where possible. finding ways to get some of the coordinating factors that you've been touching on, and to do it within a constrained budget environment. But I do want you to understand, A, we very much value your hard work and commitment over not just a few years, but many years. And second of all, we appreciate your support for all of the English language learners, and we will work very hard to make the program not just as good as possible, but where it should be. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so now with that, our work session ends, so we can Okay. All right, welcome. And we come next to item 3 on our agenda, and that is recognition and reports. Tonight we have the fall student athletes, the champions of character, and we have Coach Harris to come up and do the introductions.
Yeah, it's green now. There we go. Good evening. Last Monday, at our annual Fall Sports Awards ceremony, we recognized 7 individuals, 7 student athletes as champions of character. These individuals exemplify the traits of integrity, respect, responsibility, sportsmanship, and leadership. This evening, they're here to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their seasons.
Hello, my name is Jack Goggin, and I'm a senior at George Mason High School. I play on the golf team, and this year we had a much better year than we did in years past. We had a win record of 5-3, as opposed to something 1 and then a much larger number last year. So that was mostly because of a lot of underclassmen that really stepped up their game, and one named Nick Wells, who frustratingly but very easily got better than me throughout the whole year. But anyway, that was also because some other schools lost some very good seniors. But regardless, we won a lot of games this year. And on my end, I did my best to try and unify a lot of people on the team, because golf, what it often turns into is just 5 people playing golf at the same time, because it's a very individual sport. So I also wanted to thank my coach for giving me this award, because golf is such a maybe emotionally intertwined sport for anyone who plays it. Getting the character award for it means a lot to me, so thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Daniel Reinfurt. I'm a senior at George Mason High School, and I am a member of the George Mason football team. This year we were 2-8, which is not the best. We were much better last year, I believe 7-3, and won a playoff game. So not the best season, but the team had a lot of injuries and a lot of issues that sort of nagged us throughout the year. And we're a really small football team. On varsity, we really have around 20 people playing. So it was not as good of a season as we wanted, but I thought the team played very, very well this year. We fought through a lot and came together through a lot of adversity and played really well overall. And I'm just very honored to have this award. Just being football with so many people on the team, for me to get this award is, I'm very honored by it.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brooke. I'm a senior, and I just finished the cross-country season. We had an awesome season. We actually won most of our Wednesday meets, which are the smaller meets, and a lot of girls had a lot of great PRs, personal records, at the Saturday meets. We came third at states at the end of the season, which is a great accomplishment for us, especially because we lost 4 of our varsity seniors last year. We also came together as a team. We're a really close team, and I think the seniors did a great job of just bonding everyone and making everyone look forward to practice every day.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is CT Dodge. I'm a senior from the Guys George Mason cross country team. This summer, the Guys team really came together, and we had a big goal to try to make it to the state meet this year, because last year we were only able to send 1 runner. And so over the summer, a lot of people really came together, started working hard, started pushing themselves, and started taking the sport really seriously. And over the season, we really grew as individuals and as a team, working together, and we were able to send the whole cross-country team to the state meet this year, so that was a really big accomplishment for us. We're really proud of that, and hopefully we'll be able to continue that tradition in the future as a lot of younger runners step up. And
All right, congratulations. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Manon Dees. I'm also a senior, and I just finished my last season on the field hockey team. This season we had a pretty young team. We graduated 12 seniors last year, which is more than half the team. But everyone stepped up and filled those big shoes. We went all the way through the first round of the regional tournament, and we had a winning record of 11-9, which we're really proud of. We were pretty uncertain at the beginning of the season. This award means a lot to me because I know that it was a really hard decision for our coaches. There are just so many girls on our team that could have easily won this award. So thank you for your support of our program, and looking forward to seeing the girls do well next season.
Congratulations.
Hello, my name is Callie Kemp, and I was part of the cheerleading team at Mason. This year we had a great season. We weren't able to compete, but hopefully the girls will be able to compete in the next few years. We were able to come together and create our own homecoming routine, which was enjoyed by many people, and just grow as a team really with our new coaches and our teammates. We were able to come together and really put on a good performance. So hopefully the girls will be able to take it on and compete and win. So, and I was so honored to win this award because all the girls were great, and yeah, thank you.
Congratulations.
Hi, I'm Andrea, and I'm one of the 3 seniors on Mason's varsity volleyball team. We came off a really historic season last year. We first ever in Mason history to get a conference win. So we finally ended up on one of those banners in the gym at MEH. So we were trying to recreate that this year, but we lost two key seniors last year. But I think that we just did really well to the new dynamic. We had a stellar record. We went 15-5, which is the best record that Mason volleyball has ever had, and we really owe that to our ability to, develop good chemistry on and off the court, which I think was showed really well. I really think that the leadership on the team was also just as stellar. We went through a lot of obstacles, especially in the middle of the season. Really looking forward to how the program develops in the next few years, and really thankful for the support that you guys in the community has had.
Thank you. All right, would you all come up and get a picture with us here up on the dais? Is it better? All right, well, congratulations again.
Best wishes for next year.
All right, next up on our agenda, we have item 4, public comments and requests. In accordance with School Board Bylaw 2.30, the time for each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Additional written statements may be submitted to the clerk for dissemination to the board members and for the record. If you would like to speak, please come up and fill out a form. The first speaker tonight is Kathy Klayman. Welcome.
I've spoken at this podium many times, but never before the school board. It's a pleasure to be with you. Good evening, happy holidays. My name is Kathy Kleiman, and I live at 203 Grove Avenue, and it's wonderful to see old friends who I haven't seen in a long time. I'm here to thank you for something, to thank you for the personalized learning program that is in our schools now, and particularly for the program in the high school. I've seen incredible changes over the last few years in the high school, and I wanted to share my personal experience and the experience of my children with the personalized learning program. And then thank you more fully, as well as our teachers, staff, and administrators who have made this program possible. As you know, I've had 2 children in the high school in the last few years. My son Sam graduated last year, and my daughter Rebecca is in the 11th grade. And they use the personalized learning program very differently. So my son, Sam, realized he had to be in 2 places at once in 11th grade. And since he didn't have Hermione's time changer, he had to figure out a different schedule. And he had to be actually in American history and band at the same time. And so he spent the summer studying American history, sometimes at the school, sometimes at our house, sometimes at Starbucks, and he could do that thanks to the laptop that you provided him. I thought he was moving too quickly, but he passed the SOL with a perfect score and laughed at me, and went on to take wind ensemble with Miss West in the fall. He had an amazing year, his junior year, senior year, with the percussion section, and you saw him in many concerts and the pit orchestras. It was the personalized learning program that gave him that opportunity. My daughter's a little different. She did not inherit the public speaking gene in our family. And so she uses a personalized learning program in a different way. She's very uncomfortable in English class, and making presentations for years has been a real problem for her. But last year, her fear of English went away with the High C program. So she enrolled in the High C English program, and she worked with her teacher, Miss Thrush, who designed the curriculum that she's using. And she was able to go through English and the reading and writing and grammar at her own speed, and then meet with Ms. Thrush to talk about the assignments, to talk about the issues. High C gave Rebecca a safe and challenging environment. and an alternative way to work with the teacher and the materials. And now she's in High C English in the 11th grade, and again, not dreading English, and that's an amazing thing. Ms. Thrush and High C are a great example of teacher-designed curriculum in our schools. But all of the teachers in the high school have worked incredibly hard, taking parts of their class, not their entire classes in most cases, but parts of their class online. They brought their lesson plans, their notes, their assignments, links to interactive materials. They've expanded and extended their classrooms online. And I'm really proud of them for doing that, because the teaching in the classroom is still fantastic. It's absolutely incredible. But now if a student doesn't understand a concept, or if they've missed a lesson or two because they're sick, they can go online. The outlines are there, the assignment sheets are there, the due dates are there. Even if they can't be in class, they can keep up. And that's something they can do, again, because of the laptops that you've shared with our students. You've given our students access to a 21st century education, and I wanted to thank you for that.
Your time's up, so you're going to have to
Okay,
wrap up.
my time is up already?
Yep.
Okay. And I wanted to thank the staff, the administrators, Mr. Knight, and to tell you that people around the world are, because I work on education around the world, computer science education, and they're fascinated with our program. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, next up, we have Allison Kutchma.
Good evening, Allison Kutchma, 813 Fulton Avenue. I just wanted to talk to you tonight about the ESOL audit, and I really appreciate the effort and that there was such an audit, and I think it's a really important document. I hope that you all read it very, very carefully and thoughtfully and look at it. I think it's very revealing in that it tells us a lot about our school district, and I think it reveals a lot of systemic issues, because I was talking to staff many years ago, and some of these problems have been around for a long time. And so it kind of begs the process question of what process are in place for leadership to hear from staff when they voice problems. Because if I hear about them, and now it looks like we're not going to be able to solve them until the fiscal year 18 budget, problems that are 4 years old, I mean, if your child had been a ninth grader, they've graduated out of the system before the problem is solved. And I think that, I don't think it's appropriate, and I think we struggle with this in special education as well. I think it's not appropriate to have two standards. We have an excellent school district, and we provide nothing but the best. Absolutely, we have Apple laptops for everyone, and we spent over $2 million in Apple products, and yet we have a program that is struggling to meet federal standards, and that there's an audit that shows that we have a long way to go. And Mr. Ankuma, I appreciate your remarks that you said earlier. I don't recall them right now, but I really appreciate that. I don't think we should have, and I'm not saying this is what you said, but I don't think we should have two standards, and I think that we should raise the bar. And I think there's a quote, and I don't know exactly what we shouldn't judge ourselves by how we serve our highest. We should judge ourselves by how we help the people that need the most help. And that's not a very articulate rendition of that great quote, but the point is, we need to look at the students in our school district that need the help and respond to that and quickly, and give the teachers the resources that they need, but also listen to them and give them a safe way for them to maybe go directly to the school board and say, we do not have the resources that we need. I mean, maybe my son doesn't need to be able to take guitar at the high school if there's a student over here that needs to learn to read. I mean, I think that we need to make tough choices. And when I hear that we have budget constraints, well, we've always heard that, and those are just excuses. And I think that we need to help these kids, and we need to help the kids that need the most help, and we need to help them first. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kutchma. Next, we come to our closed meeting. Would somebody move us into close, please? We're going to just step in back there, so you can stay.
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, I move that the board convene a closed meeting for the following purpose: to discuss or consider the identified subject matter. Personnel under Section 2.2-3711A1 in particular, staff appointments, staff reassignments, staff resignation, staff retirement, staff performance, staff change in position, child care leave, EPED assignments, and advisory committee appointments and resignations.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Right, Mr. Kimball.
Mr. Ankuma. Mr. Castillo.
Aye.
Ms. Gill.
Aye.
Mr. Lawrence.
Yes.
Mr. Reidinger. Ms. Ward. Mr. Webb.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
All right, we'll be going into closed. I think we'll be back relatively quickly. Mr. Lawrence, do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ankuma. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? All right, would somebody please certify our closed meeting?
Mr. Chair, whereas the Falls Church Public School Board has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.2-3711 subsection B of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by this school board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law, now therefore be it resolved that the Falls Church Public School Board hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, 1, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirement by Virginia laws were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification applies, and 2, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ankuma. Mr. Lawrence, Mr. Kimball.
Mr. Ankuma.
Aye.
Mr. Castillo.
Aye.
Ms. Gill.
Aye.
Mr. Lawrence.
Yes.
Mr. Reidinger. Ms. Ward. And Mr.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Who's in charge of board docs in the content? Ms. Goodell, could you do me a favor? This has just driven me crazy for a long time. Could we change it from the Falls Church Public School Board to the Falls Church City School Board? I would sleep so much better. Thank you. All right, next we come to the consent agenda. I would seek unanimous consent to approve the consent agenda. All right. No objection, so ordered. Next we come to item 8, the presentation of the fiscal year 18 CIP. Dr. Schiller.
Chairman, Ms. High has chaired a committee of representatives from our schools in looking at a variety of different options for the calendar. And
Whoops, I think we're on CIP.
oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
That wasn't the order we had earlier. I apologize. Retract that. Mr. Padilla, would you join us as well, please? The CIP. One of the things that we want to share with the board tonight is the fact that we need to be able to provide to the city our guidance with regards to our needs for next year. In my conversations the last couple of days directly with the city manager, I tried to explain that there are a lot of moving parts at this point, and that my opportunity to study very closely with staff the condition and firsthand of George Mason, and in light of all the joint workshops meetings we've had and the study group meetings we've had, I asked Mr. Shields if indeed we can establish a placeholder for CIP for next year, so that as we work through our budget and look at a variety of different options of the impact of all the study that's being done, we could next month come to amend it. And he agreed with that we could set up a placeholder. And what I wanted to really bring to the board is that in working with Mr. Padillo and Hunter and staff, and thank you for all the insight that the board members have given to me, my greatest concern for you as you go forward and with your permanent superintendent is that the infrastructure systems of the HVAC and the roof at George Mason are going to fail. They're going to have a deleterious impact on the delivery of the educational program, notwithstanding the fact of an emergency repair is going to cost you far more, and without having the kind of monies needed. No matter what final decision the board and the city council come to with regard to how to best serve the needs of the students at George Mason with regard to a facility, whatever that may be. The fact is that nothing is going to be able to be constructed for a number of years and completed, during which time the preservation of the program and the best interests of the students demand that we take steps to assure that the systems will support the academic program. Consequently, with the help of Mr. Badillo, as well as with our construction consulting firm, Arcadis, through Bob Jones, and what we've discussed, one, we just recently received an overview of the report about the air quality standards of the school. And I'm going to ask Mr. Badillo just to give that overview. And I gave you a memo briefly of that today. And number two, I'd like for the board to seriously consider placing on the CIP for fiscal year 18 a request for funding for the repair of the roofs and several options we're making available to you with regard to the rebuilding of the infrastructure for the HVAC. Mr. Badillo, could you share some of these details with the board that we've outlined today?
So these are a little different than obviously what we've been talking about with George Mason moving forward. What we were looking at, if you look at, do you have it on board docs? Do you have my slide that I have on there? There's three options for HVAC for George Mason. I have listed option 1, 2, and 3, and then the descriptions are on the second page. Option 1 is about $14 million, we think. We're still waiting on our full estimate. Right now, we have actually our contractor finalizing a full bid for us, just to see if we have a detailed one on that. And that one would just be a full replacement of the entire system that we have now, basically just a direct replacement like we did at TJ. Second one, and that would include the ductwork. Second one is just the same thing, just no ductwork. And the third one is to put in a more energy efficient system that's similar to what we put in at Mount Daniel in the older kindergarten wing a couple of years ago. And then the roof replacement, which is $1 million for that. You can see the option 1 and 3 are roughly the same price. We are still waiting on the final cost on that. We think option 3 actually would come in a little bit lower, but we are waiting on the general contractor's price because there's a lot of other costs, hidden costs as far as moving fire alarm systems or sprinkler heads or whatever it may be. They're still working up in the ceilings, kind of getting that for us right now. But I think we're at a point where I think everybody's come to George Mason. I don't know how we're going to continue to wait. It'd be much less disruptive to do this over a summer like we did at TJ than to do this in the middle of the year when we have a major snowstorm and our roof collapses. And that's a very real possibility. If you came into schools last year, you would have seen the tons of leaks we had all over the building, and they were major. They weren't minor. And we're having major leaks on minor rain days now. So I think between the HVAC and the roof, I don't think we have much choice but to do something. And there's not really any one section that you can do that's any better than the other. I mean, the whole building needs something. So that's where I am with that.
And in terms of like the air quality?
So the air quality study, I'm not really prepared to go into super detail about it. We got the preliminary results back just from our vendor and just says all their tests that they ran, and we did a detailed study. It wasn't just mold. They were looking for things such as formaldehyde and radon and all these other things that may pop up in a building. Everything came back within normal parameters that you would expect to see in a school. So we'll have that final report in the next few days that we can share, and it'll go every single test that they did.
Board is the extent to which do you do a partial HVAC replacement with regard to equipment, and or do you also address the ductwork at this time?
So when I was talking to our HVAC contractor today about that, you're almost, depending on which system you go with, if you go with the direct replacement of what we have, you're still going to have to replace ductwork. We've got certain sections of the building that are not pulling, they're not up to code right now because they're not pulling any outside air, which they have to. So you're going to have to put in ductwork and disturb the ceilings. So we're going to be up in the ceilings doing all this anyway. At that point, you might as well do it once versus coming back and have to do it again a second time if you do a renovation or whatever you may go with the building.
Mr. Ankuma.
Mr. Padilla, this option 2, equipment only, are there no soft costs with removing and bringing and putting a replacement in?
Well, we think that's a pretty accurate estimate for the replacement, because that's kind of similar to what we did at TJ. TJ was just a replacement only. We didn't touch any of the ductworks. That's all we did. We just pulled out all the old equipment and the ceilings, the boiler rooms, that kind of thing, and then just put all brand new in. And we left the ductworks in place because that building actually had outside air coming in at the time, so we didn't have to correct.
When you mention, when I see HVAC, doesn't that include the boilers?
Yes, that would include the boilers. So we could, through partial replacement, we've got 2 boilers that are still in relatively good conditions that possibly could be salvaged with some renovation of those. The 2 really old ones in the original section of the building, there's really no life left in them. Those would have to be replaced. That's about $500,000 for those 2.
Okay, so those are the boilers that even to get them out, you'd have to break some walls or do stuff like that?
Maybe not.
Oh.
We're still waiting. I won't know everything until we get our final quote back, which we're hopefully in the next week or 2. Our vendor told us today he thinks he can replace those boilers by just chopping them in half, pulling them out through the current door, and he would replace them with some smaller boilers that would be able to fit through the door. So he thinks he can eliminate that whole thing. And if we actually even went with option 3, you would eliminate all your boilers altogether. And those boiler rooms would just be big rooms for storage or whatever you wanted to put in them.
Okay.
Questions?
Thank you.
Mr. Padilla, how much of this equipment under any of the options can be repurposed in a follow-on project?
We've had this discussion with like Grunley and Hess and previous projects. Unless you have the blueprints in your hand for your new building and you were speccing it out, the exact same equipment that you're going to pluck from one and put on the other, there's no way to know that. That doesn't mean you would throw it out. You could easily salvage it. The state has various options for selling it. You could take it off and get a discount.
For pennies on the dollar, though, right? 50 cents on the dollar? How much on the dollar?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Okay. I'll tell you honestly, this gives me grave concern. I understand the need to maintain a school that is habitable. My children go there. I don't want the roof falling in on them or their friends or anybody there. But we're talking about a potentially huge wasted expenditure, because you're looking at equipment that will have a useful life of how long? In terms of this new equipment? 10, 20?
Potentially.
And we're talking about potentially throwing it out in a matter of a year and change. Or we're allowing this perhaps to drive us into a solution that is suboptimal simply because we don't want to waste this money. So I would ask you, is there a 4th option for HVAC, and that is to replace on a spot basis faulty equipment as it happens? I know the auditorium has a unit that's been inoperative for quite some time. Is there a 4th option where we can complete discrete units to avoid, the hemorrhaging this amount of money just is tight as it is already. I just have an extremely difficult time seeing our way forward to spend this kind of money. So is there another option we haven't considered?
I don't think there's any place, and if you ask my staff, I don't think there's any place you could go into that building and them to tell you which units are worse than the others, because they're all equally bad. We were faced with the auditorium units because they had failed, and that was a 4, 5, 6 month project through permitting, ordering, budgeting. It's not a quick process. So if we have units fail on a wing of classrooms, it's not a simple fix. It's one of those that we're going to be calling in our contractors, we're going to be calling in our insurance company to give us temporary service, which is not cheap either. And it's very disruptive that you're doing all this work during the school year while we're occupied. So it's a lot of money, but we're headed down that road, and I don't know what other options we're going to have if there's not a definite, and there is no definite at this point, of a high school plan.
Well, First of all, I would tell you to go and watch some old Star Trek reruns and be Mr. Scott and figure out how to make this thing work on.
We're trying.
Yes,
We're
okay,
trying.
you can't
We are
change the
trying.
laws of physics, I know.
Yeah.
Okay, Ms. Ward and then Mr. Reidinger. And then
Um,
Mr. Lawrence, sorry.
I understand, Mr. Chairman, your concern about the expense and possibly having a new school in a few years, and we invest all this money in a new HVAC equipment. Is there any possibility that can be repurposed, the HVAC that you buy for the current Mason building?
I mean, it's like we were saying, I mean, until we have an exact plan, but I think if you guys and the city council voted and said, this is what we are doing, we were gonna expense this money, I think we would try to work with, whether it be a construction company, an architect, or something, to see what we could do. I don't think the idea would necessarily be to just go do this without any consultation of what our future is gonna be. But these are the real costs, and this is the place that we are in at this point.
No, I understand. I'm not sure if you understood my question, though. I mean, can we take the replacement HVAC that we put in the current high school and actually use those in a new building, or otherwise get some money back out of it?
I can't guarantee you could use it in the new facility. It would depend on if it would be scaled to whatever that building was designed for. But we could sell it.
Yeah,
The
I was
state
gonna ask you that
we sell things, the city sells things through surplus property all the time. The state has a system. We've sold generators that we bought, and they were too small for the new TJ wing. It needed a larger one, so we sold one that we had just put in a few years back before the project had started.
May I interject then and say, is there any of that stuff on the market now that we could be buying?
Well, I haven't looked at that, and that would be something we would have to spec out to a vendor. But when you do that, you're not going to have a warranty. Most vendors will not go down that route. That's not really something they want to do. And these are large units. I mean, some of these units are as large as half of a school bus. They're not something that are just like you can just pluck off the internet and put on. I mean, it's a very complex system.
Sure, I understand that. But let's see what's out there, because I think we can't leave any stone unturned here. Mr. Reidinger.
Thank both Isebe and the superintendent. I think I've been concerned for some time that we're probably wasting money by continually repairing that which can no longer be repaired. And it's good to see some real estimates about what the cost would be to remedy the situation. I mean, based on everything I've heard, I'm not an expert, but based on everything I've heard from the experts, the likelihood of the roof or a substantial part of the HVAC lasting until we can do a full-on reconstruction or renovation of George Mason is approaching none, and certainly slim. The memo from the superintendent suggested that it was perhaps 2 years that we would have a major system failure. And if a major system failure happens during the middle of the school year and our kids are studying their high school English classes in 30-degree temperatures, that's going to be a problem. Certainly, the roof appears to be a complete dead letter. And I'm also worried that doing the HVAC separately from a time of doing the roof doesn't make a whole lot of sense, given that, and I assume under both the systems, some of the HVAC units would continue to sit on the roof like they are right now. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
So it seems to be cheaper to do altogether. The question I've got is not whether this is something we have to do, and certainly I agree with the chairman that doing this at this time is probably, I mean, if we decide to do a rip and replace for the building, is going to be more expensive than otherwise. I think it's just a symptom of the historic underinvestment that the city has made in infrastructure for some time. The question I've got really is more, because we don't know yet what we're doing with the high school, it certainly makes sense to minimize costs and preserve flexibility, even if in the long term that's more expensive. I would also agree with the chairman that, looking for anything we can do to avoid undue costs makes a lot of sense. But I worry about the ductwork, because if we do a rip and replace, then that's certainly just $8 million that we don't need to spend if we can continue to live with the current ductwork. If we do a renovation on the building, I don't know enough to say whether or not the ductwork is better replaced when you're doing a renovation or you're replacing your HVAC. And it feels to me a little like it's better replaced when you're doing a renovation. So if you're going to do a renovation of the building, or you're going to do a tear down option 2, which is significantly less expensive, at least feels to me like it makes more sense. So I'd like to have a little bit of a better understanding of how, understanding that the actual HVAC units, the boilers and the air conditioning units are approaching failure, what's the status of the ductwork? It doesn't sound like that's on the same 2-year time term as the main units themselves. The second thing is it would be good to understand a little bit more about if there's a renovation done of George Mason, whether the ductwork would be better replaced at that time as opposed to now. And that's probably something Arcadis could advise us on. The last thing is, if we're going to go forward with this, which I think we ought to, it would be good to have a more substantial understanding of the basis for the 2-year prediction that the HVAC units are not going to last, or what the lifetime of the roof is. Even if that means bringing in, I don't know if Arcadis can do it, or we have an external inspection, but some document saying, person with qualifications, have looked at the roof and or HVAC, and it will die in a year, or something that says that it's a matter of urgency to give us some comfort that we can't afford to wait for a George Mason renovation project to be fully undertaken. Thank you.
Mr. Lawrence and then Mr. Nkuma.
All this construction stuff is above my pay grade, but let me keep it real simple. I'm not optimistic anything is going to happen very soon. So in addition to all of this, Sevi, let's put all this aside and say, God forbid, in February, we have something that says, all right, boiler exploded, roof caved in, you got to educate the kids. I'm looking for a line that will also give us the cost of renting the next Motel 6 or whatever to educate the kids, because that has to happen. So for me, this is all great, but better still, if this, we don't want it to happen, but should something happen, and you call us tomorrow at 4 a.m. and say, the boiler's gone, the kids can't go to school there, what do we do, and what could that potentially cost? That would be some information, not now, but for me, that would be some information, that would be something to sort of focus our attention on sort of the issues here, because we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, some of the useful life, some of these things had their sell-by dates 20 years ago, right? So we don't know when it's going to happen.
And with relation to like the HVAC, we've had discussions, Hunter and I have had discussions with our insurance company. They have services, literally 18-wheelers that they come in and they can pump in within a few days. So we wouldn't be down if something completely failed and there's absolutely no way to repair it.
But there's a cost to it.
There is a cost.
Right.
And so we have to figure out what that is.
If you could show us that or give us some estimate, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Lawrence.
I'm sort of at a loss as to where to begin. I understand the idea behind it, and we all know the facilities are awful. The roof back are just waiting to fail. My problem here is I see this as a ticket for people to kill the high school. Maybe it's just because, Aaron and I have been on this committee where we meet 3 times a day for the last 7 years, but there's so much focus on the cost of everything, which, there has to be when you're spending millions and millions of dollars. But my biggest concern is when this hits, the city, the planning commission, people are going to look at it and say, thank God, we've got that taken care of. We can go and revive the GM Planning Committee in 10 years. So that's a major concern of mine because there's enough pushback without something like this on here. The idea of getting more, like Michael said about, Michael and Phil about, people who are qualified to say this is what it is, not just, Dr. Schiller, you've got great qualifications, but I don't know if, HVAC engineering is one of them. But definitely need that. But my biggest fear is just looking at these numbers. People will say, you've got a new roof, you've got a new HVAC system. The high school's taken care of for now, and the GM process will grind to a halt. That's my biggest concern.
May I speak to that?
Okay, just, and sorry, one question for Dr. Schiller. When you said this is a placeholder, did you mean you want to make sure they see these costs, the city, the planning commission, so that they know they are real? Or do you mean we want to actually ask them to fund this in 18, as opposed to saying, you may need to do this in 18?
More of the latter, sir, in that we put folks on notice of what we ultimately may need to plan for in the CIP, rather than it had been not placed forefront. It may be, I guess, what has driven me to this point was not just simply the concern that your district may face serious deficit of the facilities for operational, but I'm also been dumbstruck by the last meeting we had in studying the affordability issues. And coming to the realization, I'm much more pragmatic, and I don't, as I told you before, I don't have a bias. I'm looking at it with a clear eye view. That planning going forward can keep grinding on until there's the political willpower to do something and to absorb an incredible debt level for CIP and the overwhelming operational needs budget. Yes, the facilities are vital. Yes, to be able to meet the tremendous needs to operate a high-quality program, the staffing, the salary level, the benefits. Put all of those needs together. What we saw the other night in looking at tax rate, what we saw with regard to projections out in comparison to about maybe 15 other referent group communities, I have to really question to what extent in the foreseeable future that all of it would be able to be funded. Meanwhile, sitting back and saying, has every option been explored? Has every assumption been challenged of what's been driving what's going on now? And to what extent, while all of this is being studied and ultimately maybe not, or maybe have the political willpower to fund and to expand with great elasticity the debt level, what happens in the meantime to that building and to the students and to the program? If it does fail, how long? And where will the money come from? Would it not be better now to put folks on notice that as we go through this budget process over the next couple of months, it may have to be the necessity to plan for this as part of the fiscal year 18. And if indeed it's determined somewhere, somehow, that there isn't the political willpower or the financial capacity to invest in both operations as well as physical facilities, then maybe options have to be looked at as where is the most critical need in order to support and advance the George Mason program for the students. And is there a way for you all to be able to get everything that you want short of a brand new building that will take 4 to 5 years to fund, construct, and then find alternative ways to house all these students? As I look at my options, if I was sitting here long-term, new permanent superintendent coming in, I'd have to ask, what's been on the table, what has not been considered? As you know, last week, we're given 4 or 5 different options to look at. Door number 1, door number 2, door number 3, door number 4. And that's when it struck me that some derivative of what I thought of door number 2 might be the very best way to go forward that could accomplish much of what you want to do, short of having a brand new school. But the question for me keeps coming back to what if. I like carrying an umbrella in the car in the event it's going to rain. I like having insurance policies in the event of. And I'm looking at this as your built-in insurance policy against a hedge that you will not find the wherewithal, the political willpower, the financial funding to do what should be done. And I'm just laying this on the table that I'd rather put the city government on notice of what may be coming forward and not delaying this year after year. That's my whole thinking there. I have other ideas or perhaps options that the committee will be looking at, but I'm just terribly concerned. I've lost a lot of sleep over the condition of that school and what it may mean in order for this exceptionally fine school district to be able, over the next 4, 5, even 6 years, not only absorb increased enrollment, but more importantly, position itself to serve and provide programs that are world-class. The facilities do not allow you to do that at this current time. But how long can you wait before the infrastructure fails you? That's my thinking. That's why I'm calling it a placeholder. That's why I talked to the city manager, so that we can withdraw this if some resolution has come by the Joint Council and School Board over the next 4 to 6, 8, 12 weeks. Or a path is found that is by necessity we have to do. And that's why I know it's a sensitive issue, and I know it challenges some of your assumptions, but I would not be doing my job if I was not trying to think strategically on your behalf for what's in the best interest of the kids and the program.
Thank you, Dr. Schiller. Ms. Gill.
So I share Mr. Lawrence's concerns, having sat in these committee meetings. That said, I don't think we have an option besides doing, I think, option 2 in a roof replacement. I don't see how we continue to allow this condition of this building to degrade with kids inside of it. We cannot risk the roof falling in. We cannot risk boilers failing. And I think that to Mr. Ingham and Mr. Reitinger's points, the more data we have to support how that this is an urgent problem, it's not an important problem, it's urgent, and we need to fix it now. And if we don't fix it, the costs and the risk associated with not fixing it are enormous. They far outweigh the cost of replacing these systems now. I do think that the council is moving closer to understanding that these are urgent needs, especially after Jim Snyder went through the building, and the city's people have gone through and also confirmed what our people have been saying for years, which is this building is in terrible condition. They are feeling the same way, and I think that they will be more receptive to this. I don't think it's going to be easy. I think it's still going to be a lot of work on our part to provide the data and explain exactly why this is so urgent. But I think that they are moving closer to that position than they have been in the past. And I think the working group has really helped them get there, and the tours of the building. So thank you for helping them see that.
Mr. Webb.
Thank you. For me, it is an issue that is becoming more and more apparent that we are in a position that these systems are end of life, and we have to figure out how to take care of them. I do share the concern that if we expending this amount of money, that it may give some level of cushion to some folks that we may not have to do this. But bigger picture is that we've kicked the can down the road way too long on these buildings, that there has not been political will for decades now of taking care of these facilities, of what everyone in the city moves here for, and the first thing that they say, they move here for the schools, but yet we are unwilling to spend the money to keep these facilities up. We are at a dire point right now that I don't want on my watch for something to happen to one of the buildings, and God forbid our students are being there. I think it was an embarrassment when our kids had to wear jackets when the facilities, when these facilities failed on us last year. It is an embarrassment that we have buckets catching water, and as Mr. Padilla just said, it's not even major rain events anymore. It's a shower that now we're putting buckets in to catch rainwater. It is an embarrassment for a school system and a community that prides itself on their schools to have a facility like this. I understand that it's going to cost a lot of money, but it was going to cost potentially less money 10 years ago when we've had these same conversations. We have been having this conversation for over a decade now, and at some point, if we want to move forward, and I'm saying that because I've sat on the other side and we've had this same conversation before, and we still have gotten nowhere, and not even, this is the closest we've gotten to some type of potential solution of renovation or new construction. And even now, we are grinding our gears to an almost halt within this process because my dollars, it's becoming of the expense of it. But for us to pride ourselves on our schools, to say that we are a school that started because, a city that started because of education, to not afford the money that needs to be done, it's getting to a point of who are we as a city? Because it's becoming apparent that we are not necessarily putting up our money where our sense of pride has been in the last few years. Yeah, so we need to, again, prioritize. I want to make sure that we have a safe facility for our school, and these are things that at this point need to happen. A good friend of mine and planning commissioner uses a term that has been happening for years in our city is we've put Band-Aids on things for years, and Band-Aiding is not going to continue to be effective for what we need to do.
Ms. Ward.
I just want to agree with Ms. Gill and Mr. Webb about the condition of this school. This is not a new thing, as you know, Sevi. And my concern lies more, less from having instruction interrupted than having a student injured. And this has been my point since I've been on this board. I've been stressing the liability issue of that school, and not just the liability issue, but the actual, do we want to be responsible? I don't want to be sitting on this board and have a child that attends our school system injured. And I think it is an absolute embarrassment that we live in one of the wealthiest communities in the country, and yet our school looks the way it does, leaks the way it does, it's falling apart the way it is. It is an absolute embarrassment. How can we live in one of the wealthiest communities and have this kind of high school? We have one high school. You think we could have built a high school by now? I'm absolutely to the point, I'm trying to contain myself, but every time these conversations come up, I'm apoplectic with the way this community, not the whole community, but certain people pick apart our school budget. We are down to a bare bones budget. We're trying to educate these kids. This school has brought in more people into this community, and yet we're not doing anything to help the school system. We're taking away more money every year. We're not building a high school. The high school's falling apart. And at this point, we need to do something. I don't want to have any child injured on my watch. I would like to see this go into the CIP. I'd like the HVAC and definitely the roof. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. Mr. Padilla, I want you to know that we are not shooting the messenger. And
I understand.
And if anything, a prophet is without honor in his own country, and you have been prophesizing this for some time, and I think sometimes you have been receiving shots as a messenger. But I would ask you a couple of things. We've talked about the roof falling in. I know the roof leaks. I don't know if the roof will fall in. Has a structural engineer weighed in on the possibility of a roof collapse? And if not, should we think about getting some assessment as to exactly what the state of the roof is? Because there's a big difference between leaks and collapse. And I think we need to get our arms around that.
We have not brought in a structural engineer. We have had our roofing contractors out, and there is a rotten roof underneath the current roof. There's 2 roofs on the building. When in 94, they just put a new roof on top. We can see the rotten and the wetness in between the layers, so we know that there's got to be something in there. I'm not a structural engineer, so I can't speak if there's any one section that could possibly collapse, but we could very well get an engineer. Our insurance company has a lot of resources that we can bring in to look at some of that. And
I don't know what the sense of the board is, but I think it would behoove us to know what we're looking at here. And you know, if it costs another 7 figures, I don't want to do it, but Mr. Ankuma?
Absolutely. I personally am not a fan of spending any more money. I think we've had enough assessments. I wouldn't support any such move to bring in somebody to tell us that we have a problem we already know about. I would absolutely not
it's a
support
question
it.
of degree. I mean, leaks are one thing, collapse is another. If we risk leaks, that's one thing. I would pay money to find out the answer. Is it going to collapse or is it going to leak?
Mr. Chair, walking around the school with trash cans catching water all around, I think tells us more than enough. I mean, like I said, I'm only one member of this board, but I wouldn't support a cent for that kind of expense. I'd rather use it to do this or fix it rather than do any more assessment. It's bad. We know it's bad. I mean, I'm more frustrated than Ms. Ward. And I think today I listened to a couple of the city council members, not officially, but I basically let them know this is getting nowhere until, Dr. Schiller said it, it's the political will that's affecting us. And maybe the less I say, the more. But any additional monies towards this effort is money down the drain. That's my.
Mr. Padilla, could you find out what a general health check of the roof would be from a structural engineer for us and give us an estimate?
I'm fairly confident our insurance company can do this for little to no cost. I'll call them tomorrow and see if we can, that would be and what the timeline it would take to do it.
Would the rest of the board be interested in knowing whether we face a collapsing roof?
If it is free, yes.
Well, I guess one question is your estimate here for roof replacement, that is just to fix leaks, not to fix any structural damage that may be found under the 300 roofs that are all failing, right?
That is just for a full roof replacement to remove the second roof and put one roof on the building. So if they pull the roof off and they find rusted steel beams under there that are the actual roof support, that may not be included in this particular price, correct?
Right.
All right. So please find out what that is and get back to us. I think another avenue would be, depending on where the hot spots are on the roof, we should look into relocatables. Maybe we have to isolate part of the building, close rooms, and use a couple of trailers. That might be a substantial savings. I don't know. I think we should look into it and find out. Dr. Schiller, I would ask you to look at the locatable option as well. So if you could give us your thoughts on that. You know, the challenge that I see here is that this will cascade. If we spend this amount of money, all we're getting is a cooler, drier building that is completely out of date, that is 65 years old, that is not fit for purpose, that Dr. Schiller says works against our program for our students, and that is no more modern. It will be a decrepit school with a new roof and HVAC, and for a price tag of approximately 10 to 12% of the projected cost for a new school or an expanded and renovated school. That's a tremendously bad bargain, and I don't think it could kill the high school. I think it could kill the city, because we won't be able to finish a high school that will be able to replace what we have. Because if you budget 15, 17, 20 million for the new roof and HVAC. Remember, we have to expand the school to have capacity for approximately 200 additional students. By my rough estimates, that's $30-odd million. We haven't renovated the school, the existing school yet at all. So, there is no cheap exit plan here. I'm sorry, Mr.
I want to respond whenever you get through
Okay.
with that, if you don't
All
mind.
right, jump in.
I've got something, I'm sorry.
No, please.
So what I wanted to say, because I see your concerns and Mr. Lawrence's concerns, but I don't see this as a kill of the new high school project. I actually see this as a separate option for a renovated and expanded high school, and that also allows us space for everything that we wanted. But with respect to what Dr. Schiller was saying, I've only been to a few of those George Mason meetings, and I'm not an economist. I don't have what Hunter, his degree of that field, but I don't know where the money's coming from. And what worries me is that I've been here for 10 years. These conversations, just like Mr. Webb said, have been happening my entire time, ever since I started. And we've yet to, an RFP hasn't been issued, a bond hasn't been issued. And I'm looking at it from my perspective that when the facility fails, it's my department, and I want, these are the options that I think could get us through. And I think we're prepared to show a separate option at our next George Mason project meeting, but this meeting kind of happened first. I might have preferred if it had happened in a different order. Okay. So I think we have options that can not, we wouldn't throw everything away, that could still allow us to do this and get what we want down the road at a much reduced
But frankly,
price.
you don't know that, and we don't know that, because we haven't issued an RFP to ask somebody who does this for a living to tell us which is more economical, right? We don't know.
Right.
And we're not going to know by having the working group sit and chat with Arcadis. We need to issue an RFP, and that brings up, we might as well have a slightly pointed discussion. This body has water to carry. We could have had a project that would go up for referendum this last election, and we as a body chose not to do that. We as a body could issue an RFP for a new or renovated or expanded school at any time. We have not done that. So when are we going to step up and do this? Because it's on us. We can't sit here and point fingers at the city council and say it's all their fault, because it's not. And I've been saying repeatedly that we are in crisis mode, and everybody says, well, those are just inflated numbers and everything's going to be fine. And it's not, and it won't be unless we get off the dime and do something. So when are we going to do something?
Mr. Chair, could we do anything without having the ability to pay for it?
Well, maybe we should find out how much it would cost by getting bids from somebody.
Well, maybe I've got it backwards. The bids are one thing, but we don't have the money. We have to ask somebody for the money, and unless they put a number or give us the checkbook, we can talk all we want, and that's what's cost us 3 years. So I don't want you to blame the board. I think this board has done what it can within its powers. But when, the mayor's looking for a place with a building with a sense of place, and it's being larded up with, we issued an RFP. And what did we get? We got something we couldn't afford. I mean, we can't get our colleagues across the aisle to sit down, put a realistic number on the table and say, school board, go solicit a project for this amount of money. I mean, we keep going back and forth. We will end up in the same place where there's nothing we're going to do until we know how much we can spend. And that's not our decision. At least I don't see our ability to make that decision. We need somebody to say, here's a check, go find something that fits. And until we get that, we will sit here and spin our wheels for years to come. They've spun it for 10 years. We'll spin it some more. So I don't think it's the board. I would defend that to the day I die. This is not, the board has done what it can or done everything. I mean, you were there. You spearheaded this effort the last couple of years to try to get them to decide on something, issued an RFP. And what happened? Can't make a decision.
Well, but the problem is, we repeatedly stop short of actually finding out what a proposal would look like. I think it's an open question that a joint PPA might be the most economical avenue still. I don't know, and we might never know because we might not go that direction, but there are two components. What's it gonna cost, and whether it's a renovation and expansion, because it's not just a renovation, it's an expansion, or whether it's a new building. People do this for a living, and we should ask them what the most economical course is. We could spec in the RFP that we're going to use Trane Model 300 HVAC units, and whatever they spec is going to have to repurpose those ones for the roof. We can do that. We know what the program is. All we have to do is put an RFP out on the street and get some bids, for heaven's sake. And until we do that, the whole question of what we can afford isn't going to be open, because we're not going to be able to say, here's our time frame, and so here is the X acres available for development. How are we going to make that development throw off enough money to pay for the school, which we will now have an idea for how much it costs? If we sit here and complain that we don't know how much money we'll have or how much the school costs, and we don't take affirmative steps to find out the answer to both of those, we will continue to chase our tails. And so again, I will ask this board, when are we prepared to take action as a body to do our piece? Because I will also remind this board that the alternative proposal that was presented by the opponents of the joint PPEA was the so-called dual track, call it whatever you will, I'm so frustrated now I can't even remember what the term Mr. Shields uses was. But we do our job and we spec the school, and the city council does its job, and it comes up with a development plan to pay for this. We have not done that. We have simply replaced the joint PPA with a sit here and cogitate for getting on 6 months. And it's not sustainable. We're going to be in the worst of all worlds. We're going to have a substandard school that still is in need of expansion, and it's going to cost a great deal of money that will require a great deal of borrowing, coming up near $100 million. So again, I ask you, my colleagues, when are we going to do something? Mr. Reidinger.
So I'm going to strive to maintain composure.
Well, at least somebody's going to do it here.
With respect, Mr. Chairman, I think we're ready to get off the dime and do something. I'm not sure we're ready to get off the dime and do the thing you want us to do, because I don't think what you were expressing is a good way forward, and I'll tell you why. It seems to me that it is true that going down the road of spending $7 million on a new roof, on an HVAC, makes a full-on replacement of a high school, as Mr. Lawrence indicated, far less likely. Because when you invest $7 million to make a high school livable for the current future, then you don't want to burn that $7 million by ripping it out. That said, I don't think $7 million is going to cause the city to disintegrate. I think what will cause the city to disintegrate is what you've just expressed, which is we continue to lock gears and do nothing forever. I think if we can't get off the dime and move forward on a joint path to build a high school that meets our needs, then I will be the first person to walk around the city with a petition to dissolve the city and join Arlington or Fairfax or whatever it is, because this is why we exist. That said, I don't think that going out and doing an RFP without the agreement of the City Council for a full-on rebuild of the high school, without a plan for whether it's going to be partial and in what degree we're going to phase things and whether we're going to do development or not, is going to move the ball forward. In fact, I think it'll harden feelings and make things rougher. What I suggest we do is something similar to what you're saying. And that is, one, I think we ought to recognize that what's been presented is maybe what we have to do. Maybe it's not. Maybe the magic school fairy is going to come down from the sky and wave a wand and give us a new building in time so that we don't have to replace the HVAC or the school or the roof. I don't think that's likely, but it's a possibility. We could move quickly enough. But this has been presented to us as an option as opposed to something we have to do. That said, if you could present me a way that we could get this passed in a referendum and a bond issued this summer or this spring so we could replace this summer, I would, based on what I know right now, vote for it. Second, I think we need to, as rapidly as possible, come up with a joint plan with the city council for how we are going to build things. I think we are certainly going to end up in a phased construction process. I agree with a lot of what you said, but you presume that the only way to get where we want is to build a high school all at once. Because I don't know, if we could do an RFI for different options, I'd be happy to talk about doing that, but I still think we ought to come up with something and present it to the city council and talk about it rather than going off on our own. So all that's to say, I think there are paths forward. I agree that we have not moved quickly enough, not only in the last year, but in the last 20 years. But we've got to deal, we're entitled to our own opinions. We're not entitled to our own facts. And
Well, that in this new era, we may be, actually.
point taken. But I think perhaps in Falls Church, as political as we are, we can try to maintain an air of rationality in data-driven decision-making. So if the chairman is suggesting that we ought to come up as rapidly as possible using the structure we've got with the city council of a plan for how we would want to affordably rebuild the high school and try and get out an RFP in January, or at least an RFI, to get proposals for how that would be done. Once we have some sort of agreement with at least 4 people on the city council that this is an approachable way and maybe an affordable way, sign me up. Sign me up. But going out and issuing an RFP for an all-on rip and replace of the high school without any agreement from the city council that they'll sign off on that, I don't think is the right way forward. And I do think, I want to get further data, but I do think that this may be the only way forward. And I would say, and I do have one question along with my diatribe, so I'm not sure I maintain composure, but I'll do my best. I apologize if I've gone over the line. I do want to know when we've got to take action on this, because if we want to include this in the CIP, if we've got to vote on it tonight, then I'll move to approve this tonight. If we can wait a week and get additional data that doesn't cost us anything, then I'm happy to wait a week to get additional data. But I don't think we can afford to let this opportunity pass to have immediate, urgent, to use Mr. Ankuma's term, urgent needs met. We can't allow that to pass without taking action. Thank you.
Well, with equal respect, Mr. Reidinger, I would say that my comments have been misinterpreted. I am religiously agnostic about the solution that will be the most economical. And I am happy to spec in the RFP, phase it, remodel it and expand it, tear it down, and explain your reasons for what option you chose and what option you didn't choose, so that we will understand. And I also am painfully aware that simply because we issue an RFP doesn't mean that we will get a high school that results. This would have to be socialized with our colleagues on the city council so that they could look at it as well, review it, understand, based on the bidder's input, what is possible, and then we can decide. We may decide that we're going to go a different direction, but at least we'll have something to act on. And so I don't have any dog in the fight. My children will not be in this school under any circumstances. And so I don't know I don't have any preordained outcome. I have a sense of where things may go, but I reserve the right to be wrong, and I probably will be. And so, but what we have to do is we have to ask the questions so people can tell us the answers, and we haven't done that. I've said, let's do an RFI, let's do a request for solutions, but let's get something out on the street so that we can find out. And, then we'll have something to chew on, we'll have something to discuss with council, and then we'll have the basis for moving forward. But unless and until we do that, we're going to be in stasis further. So that is the basis on which I would like to go forward, and I do so with full knowledge that it may go nowhere, but at least I think it will advance our knowledge and lead to something down the road. Dr. Schiller.
I have, for the last several weeks, and watching all the meetings, participating in all the meetings, and doing my own independent analysis, I have not seen where the conversation has been, what does the program need? What is necessary to continue to grow the academic program and become what the school system has been known for? Excellence in the future. It's all been about numbers, it's all been about enrollments, it's all been about what kind of a movement, new school renovation, but I've not seen any discussion as to what is it about the current program that's not being best supported by facilities, and what is it about the future program that we need to be world-class in Falls Church? I could tell you from my perspective what we don't have here. I could tell you where I would place my bets on where I would invest for the future, but those are my biases. But I would ask you, where the world is going for the last few years and where it's going to go is going to be in an area for which we do not have in that high school the facilities to support a high-quality program. The sciences, the technology, robotics, the research, all the kind of room and space that you need in order to deliver the program. The underbelly, the structure does not support your program, particularly in that area. The city does not have, that I've seen, a research strategic plan to build something for which the people will come for. The IB program is magnificent. The delivery of the program by dedicated staff is astounding. But you cannot deliver the kind of a program that is demanded by our emerging global economy and the kind of technology that's driving our future and the sciences with the facility that's there. I'm an old English teacher. I can teach English anywhere. I can teach history anywhere. I believe in a 50-year trend cycling that I've been trained to look at with regard to projections by learning from the past. Pardon me for going on here because everyone's getting upset, and I've bought into your community. 50 years ago, I was crawling around in the mud in Vietnam while we were watching the cities burn and our whole fabric of our society change and how it's repositioned us. 50 years before that, 1917, thereabouts, end of the war to end all wars, leading to what has shaped my parents' life, and maybe some of your parents, the Depression. It shaped the whole. 50 years before that, in 1863, do I need to tell you what that meant to the fabric of the United States? 50 years before that, in 1813, what that did to shape the fabric. We are now in 2017, 50 years trend. Do you think the world that we have seen is going to remain the same to what we're looking at and what's already developing? Do you think education is going to look that way? Technology. I guess what I'm saying is that strategically, I have not seen any evidence that what is driving the decision about new school, renovated school, addition, has been programmatically focused and as the major driver. Have I missed something?
Well, I would ask you if you've reviewed the joint PPEA RFP that went out in the school program. That would be a starting place. It may not be as detailed or expansive, but if you haven't seen that, I would invite you to
look at that.
and
But I guess
see
what I'm
where-
saying is that the conversations we're having are about the numbers that are coming. But it's not speaking to what is the program that will be the hallmark to augment the IB program that is world-class. And if you define that for your children down the road, then everything else will fall into place. New construction, phased in, renovation. and then looking beyond that. So I guess what I'm saying is that, in all due respect, I've not seen that, and I will read that first thing tomorrow. But in the couple months that I've been following and been part of all these discussions, not one word is talked about program and repositioning the school district. Much less, not one word has been talked about commercial development of repositioning the city for the future. How many more nail salons and restaurants do you need? I'm sorry, and pizza places. Where is the research and development, the technological center for Falls Church? I don't see it. You want to generate new revenues? The old mixed-use development program with the strip malls and all the computer and all of the apartments ahead, that's yesterday's model. That's not tomorrow's model. You have an opportunity to make George Mason, in whatever form you want to imagine it to be the beacon on that hill that's going to be the anchor for all commercial development. And everyone who will ever think of moving to Falls Church is going to look at what that George Mason flagship school programmatically can offer to our kids to reposition them for the future jobs. So all I would ask you is that, please, again, when we talked through the interview process, we talked about what's in the best interest of your children and the program and the school. We can accomplish all of it if we define, and as educational leaders, we identify educational due north on that compass there, and we drive toward that. The brick and mortar will follow if you build it. You build the program and through your vision. And that's my passionate statement for tonight. I'll now shut up.
Just have a quick note.
Ms. Gilt.
On that. I thank you. That was a really well put. And it brought to mind that what we have been asking for, and didn't see it until you said it, is we have been arguing our case based on an expanded population and a deteriorating building. So what we will get, based on that argument, is a renovated building with an addition off the side. We will get a building that is made safer and accommodates more students, because that's what we're asking for. We aren't asking for a building that is a 21st century building. We are basing our argument on our population is growing and our building is deteriorating. So the response to your building is deteriorating and your population is growing is we will give you a bigger building and we'll renovate it and make it a little bit nicer. But we aren't getting
Or
the
build a new
21st century. We aren't getting the programmatic changes because we aren't arguing for those programmatic changes in our meetings. We aren't talking, and it's not, I mean, it had not, until you phrased it, put it that way, I hadn't really thought about it this way, but we aren't going into these meetings, our joint meetings, and making an argument based on the future and what we want our school program to look like. We're making it based on the deficiencies we have now in terms of space and facilities. And the answer to that, again, is a renovated building.
And all the work you've done and believing in the enrollments, think of what could happen if we have another 2008, 2009. Real estate and people moving and property values. But if you build whatever you're going to build and do whatever you're going to do, that is going to position the school system and the city in such a way that what's being offered is going to be the attraction, no matter what, and people will want to come here. So I guess what I'm saying is that maybe as educational leaders, not the fiscal leaders of the city, but the educational leaders, maybe rethinking base assumptions and approaching it fresh. It'll also open the door for your argument to convince the voting public of the need on a greater scale than more kids are coming. But look how we are now redefining the future for Falls Church. That's leadership.
Well, Dr. Schiller, I would say as a cautionary statement that can also run headlong into a statement of that's a gold-plated Taj Mahal school, which is a criticism that we have received from some quarters. Now, I don't buy into that, but I do think we need to be mindful of that. I would also say, I sent you a link to the documents the educational specifications in Appendix C, Attachment 2 of the old RFP, do go on at some length. So I think, while that may not encompass the vision that we're trying to espouse, we have given this some thought, and while I think a three-legged stool should encompass enrollment, growth, physical deterioration, and program, at least right now, we've got two of those drivers. If we can burnish our program, I think that's great. I think there are also those who will recall the open classroom days of yore and experience that was accompanying that educational trend as a cautionary tale. But this has been, I would say, at least a cathartic discussion. There is a question pending as to the timing of this and what our timing window is. Do we have to do this tonight? Could we do it next week?
I guess what I've been frustrated with is that there are some artificial timelines that have been established that do not work within a rational framework of decision-making. If I understand it, we're being forced to present a CIP without all the decisions that need to be made leading up to it. And so what I've talked about, and what I'm going to turn to Sevi and to Hunter, working with and talking with Mr. Shields, is that, okay, let me put you on notice of what our critical need may be. The board has, over the next few weeks and months, a lot of heavy lifting with decision making. But I want you to be aware, here's our shot across the bow of what we minimally need in order to offer the safe. Now, and I think that's what I'm trying to say, is that to me this is awfully early to say what our capital improvement program needs are when we haven't made certain other decisions, this board. So I'm feeling as though that the tail's wagging the dog, and the big dog that's sitting here is, what is it that we really want and need? And then we can determine the capital thing. So I guess I'm asking is that, help me here, Hunter, with regard to Sevi deadlines and whatever. And I want to position the board to have all of its options available to it.
And I do know that Dr. Schiller, as he mentioned, has been talking and working with the city manager, Wyatt Shields, expressing very much these same concerns and information, and that the city manager understands it, is very sympathetic, and has expressed some willingness to bend timelines and due dates and those sorts of things. I know they've been very, very rigid in terms of getting your CIP request in by December, and then it gets to the Planning Commission in January. I think ultimately, though, it does get voted on along with the operating budgets and the general fund budgets at the end of April. And from working with Dr. Schiller, I must say, he has underscored a number of points, and especially in terms of the decisions that need to be made and the order in which they need to be made, and that the process right now, that in the rushed manner, it is really not conducive to making the sound decisions in the right order. And at this point, from the city manager's point, he's willing to work with us on that.
So the answer is not tonight. Yes?
I believe Dr. Schiller said he wouldn't recommend voting on the budget tonight.
No, I would just like to, what I spoke with is the fact that we have a placeholder, and that I'm trying to move forward the urgency of decision making.
Understood.
I could take the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune direct at it because I'm not going to be here. But if I don't move you and the city to recognize the urgency of decision making,
So if we don't do this tonight, can it be something that moves till January, or do they want us to have something to them before the end of this month?
I believe the plan is that after tonight, we will communicate with the staff at the city, once again explaining where we're at. I'm not, you know, as long as everybody's being honest here, I'll go ahead and join the crowd. One concern I have is that if the school board votes on something, and I've seen this happen, you know, in a number of years. It's like, well, you voted on it. Yeah, it was your request. That's it. And you're not allowed to change your minds anymore. You're not allowed to reconsider. And so I caution against that, with all respect to the school board.
And I ask that question more in a bit of a selfish question of, I do not want to have a meeting next week. I mean, we meet all the time, and I do not want to have a meeting next week if at all possible, being that, you know, we meet at least feels like 2 to 3 times a week, if not between the city council and us. And it seems like, and I get it, we're the lower body, but we always are meeting at least twice and kind of accommodating the other side, and the other side is going to be out for 2 weeks between now and January. So that's more of my question of, does it have to? If it does, I you know, we'll meet and take care of it. But I'm just asking that general question because you know, we probably over the last at least 2 years, I feel we have signed up for X number of meetings, and for the last 2 years, it has been way more than what.
Can we put in for overtime?
You exceeded your limit.
Hunter, I have a question. If this is to give to the city manager, to give to the planning commission to get their work done, can you and Dr. Schiller have a word with whoever heads the planning commission to say, hold your horses, we'll get it to you in a few weeks. We've got some decisions to make that are unique to the times or something, and have them wait. That way you're not under the gun.
We can certainly try that, and I think, you know, given the discussion that the school board has had this evening, there is strong reason that more discussion needs to, and analysis and information needs to be received and needs to take place prior to this body taking action.
Thanks.
And I will note that we are scheduled for a work session next week, but it will be the last one of the year.
But what are we, sorry, what are we discussing at the work session?
The last
I'm with
regularly
Mr.
scheduled
Ward.
one of the
You know,
year.
Mr. Webb, we, you know, with the city council is running the city and they're taking 2 weeks off, you know, is there anything that we're discussing next week that is vital? 85% of the budget, so we have to do it?
Personnel, that's what we're
What?
And
Fine.
That's my Christmas present to you.
right.
Thank you. No.
And I think it would behoove us to talk about the BWP report and have them present so that we have that, since it's fresh in their mind. So anyway, we digress a bit. So is it the sense of the board that we could at least wait until next week on this matter, Mr. Lawrence?
Putting on my former planning commission hat, next week would not be a problem. Waiting till January 10th or so, the city has work to do once they get our CIP to put their CIP together to then present it to the planning commission, which probably is going to happen the week after we meet on the 10th, which means that poor Cindy Mester would have no time to actually do her work, which isn't fair. The planning commission, could they push it back a week? Yes, but they have deadlines to get their CIP, along with all the public hearings and everything else about that, to the city council. So we've got to not pretend that everything can expand as far as we want. And, you know, Lawrence, getting to your point about, I mean, obviously I served with Melissa a long time on the planning commission. I know all about Band-Aids. This is a Band-Aid. This is a Band-Aid. Don't believe it's anything other than that. So the planning commission is not looking forward to a placeholder that is going to delay things, that is a Band-Aid, which would just make them more inclined to simply say, push it out a year. I mean, the number of times the high school got pushed out a year happened over and over and over and over because it was a placeholder. So if we are going to go this route, and I think we, you know, should look at this next Tuesday, this shouldn't be a placeholder. If it's FY18 and it's 6.5 months from now, it's not a placeholder. It's a funding requirement. A placeholder would be saying FY19. need to be honest. If we're talking about something that might cost $7 to $14 million, $7 to $15 million as of July 1st, that's not a placeholder, in fairness. I mean, nobody could really be convinced that. If we say we need $1 million for the roof, and Sebi, I don't know if we could do the roof separate from the HVAC, but we do the roof and then say FY19 is the HVAC, okay, that's a placeholder. But something that's coming next year is not a placeholder. It's something that we think is so urgent and it has to be funded. And we should just be honest about it, because frankly, if we say it's an 18 and we say it's a placeholder, that will give people a sense that it's really not that urgent and they could push it off. And if we really think it's urgent enough that we want it in 18, we should say it has to be funded in 18. So, and Sebi, I'm sorry, I interrupted you when I was talking. Do you remember what you were going to say? Okay, that's fine. So yeah, I think we should do it next week, get some answers, but mainly take this to the George Mason Committee on Thursday morning and reaction is, because, you know, Dr. Schiller talking to Wyatt is good. Having city council members, and there are usually at least 3 in that room, hear it, I think their reaction is too, because we need to gauge what we do by what is right, but we've also got to put on our realistic hats as well when we're talking. So I think this is something that needs to be up for next week, but I would not want to push it to January. I think that would make us look bad, even if we made the right decision.
Other thoughts? All right, well, let's get the additional information and then we can tease it. Back to the BWP report on the community. My recommendation is that we proceed and hear from them. Moving. Any thoughts one way or the other, Mr. Lawrence?
Just a question for anybody who's foolish enough to be watching this now or ever. We've got a survey that's open until January 21st, right? So I guess let's put in context for the public what public input there is if we're getting a report on public input from our search firm a month before a survey closes. And I understand they had a ton of meetings last week, but I just think we need to make people understand why we're not saying January 21st isn't a real deadline and we're just cutting it off now and we're not going to pay attention to anything going forward. This is, you know, I don't know, an interim or something that makes it sound like this isn't the final assessment of public opinion.
Right, and I discussed this with BWP, and you know, the first issue is striking while the iron's hot in terms of the meetings they had last week. With respect to the survey, they will take the survey information as it exists, and leaving it open will allow for additional comment on behalf of people who may not have been able to provide it for whatever reason earlier. And BWP will adjust any inputs as necessary to reflect the ultimate survey results. Their experience is they won't see too much of a change in what the survey results are, but if they do change, then they will adjust accordingly. So it's not going to be set in stone, and BWP is ready, willing, and able to provide updates and modifications as necessary to reflect any late breaking inputs. So that's where that is. That's where that is to the people watching. So should we talk about the calendar? And we're talking about the calendar. We're not going to do anything about the calendar tonight. Ms. High, are you going to take this? Dr. Schiller?
In November, we began meeting with all of our administrators to ask for input on the 2017-18 calendar. We asked them to go back to their staff and provide us input. The input that they provided allowed us to create 2 options. There was an option A and an option B. We met with the actual calendar committee on December 5th, and this group was made up of reps from every building, and they looked at the 2 options. The difference between option A and option B was either option A had the holiday for winter break beginning on December 20th and making January 2nd a school day, and then option B was the holiday would begin on December 21st and made January 2nd a holiday. The committee decided that option B was the one that they wanted us to put forward, and they would support with their colleagues when they went back to their school. So we sent out the calendar to the entire, all FCCPS staff for them to review. We've not heard a lot back from our staff. The two things that did come up at our meeting was, can we start school before Labor Day? Looked at the waivers that the state will allow us to have, and at this time, we don't qualify for one of those waivers because we're not as far as the snow waiver that Fairfax is getting to be able to start early next year. We don't qualify because we're not surrounded by counties who have waiver. For example, Arlington does not have that waiver, so we're not able to ride that as a result. The other component that we looked at is the innovative programs. We have lots of innovative programs, but we've not applied for a waiver for that. The second issue that came up is the late dismissal of school in June, and there was questions asked, about the 182 school days that we have for students, instructional days, and I shared that that was a decision that came from the school board back. The first day was, I think, was in 2010-11. We went to from 180 to 181, and then in 2014-15 we added an additional instructional day from 181 to 182. And so since some of the feedback that I've received from staff is asking, is there a way we can possibly go back to 180? And again, I shared that that is a school board decision. I'll accept questions.
Questions? Ms. Gill?
Why did we go from 180 to 182? Why did the board, do you know remember why the board decided that?
It was instructional time, to increase instructional time.
Are we seeing better outcomes because we have those 2 extra days of school? I mean, is this, are my kids in school 2 extra days and watching movies for 2 days? Because that's kind of what happens in June. So, I don't want to have 2 extra days and then nobody's really doing anything those 2 extra days.
And if I remember correctly, and Hunter, you may remember this better than I do, but there was a year where a decision was discussed to reduce para days and was reducing them to 187. And at one of our work sessions, the decision was to keep it at 191. And I think the school board said if we're going to keep those days and leave it at 191, we should make one of them an instructional day. And so that was one of the 2 increased instruction. But you're right that those days have ended up coming at the end of the school year, just because when we're looking at calendar, staff would like to have, a longer winter break, because that's kind of their winter intercession. So making the additional days happen in December is not something that a lot of staff or families seem to want to do. And as far as the other times in our calendar and when our quarter's in, it makes it difficult to get the days in there.
Other questions, comments?
So do we have the option to eliminate those 2 days?
As a school board, you can eliminate those 2 days.
I mean, I don't want to have kids in school not doing anything just because we were going to have 2 extra days. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Like, if it's at the end of the school year, I know that, I have little kids, but they're not doing any work, and I don't think the high schoolers aren't even in school. They're doing their externship, maybe,
And the older ones
or maybe not doing anything.
The older ones have checked out by then anyway.
Right. So I just don't, I talked to some staff have brought this up too, and they said, I don't understand why we're going those 2 extra days. Can we not go this? But I don't know if it's Margaret may have more.
And actually, when the days were put back, we used to have 2 weeks of winter break. So really, those days did come in December is where they changed. But it also, because of where Labor Day is falling, we end up having to get to 182. It makes the days in June go longer. I mean, we're getting out later.
I wasn't here for that decision, but I'm guessing it had to do with the number of contract days teachers work, the 2 extra instructional days.
They have 2 additional instructional days, and as a result, we used to have 9 unencumbered days where they could, account for their planning time, working on report cards. And so they lost, I won't say lost, but those days were traded in for instructional
They could still have
instruction.
those, they could have those days back, and they wouldn't be instructional days. They would keep those contract days.
They have to have a
So they
280-day
could keep those contract days, and the kids would not have to be in school those, the third week of June, which is, it's hard to get out of school and immediately go to 4th of July.
And they could
if they're not doing
potentially be
anything.
professional development days.
That's correct. We are required to have
Okay.
180 instructional days. We have to have at least 10 professional days where we're growing teachers, and then the other 10 days can be for professional development or for teachers to do some of the duties that they do on their own at home.
So we could
as
give
well.
those days back to our teachers?
I will make a shameless plug for teachers. I think they could use an extra 2 days at least a year, just saying.
Dr. Schiller? Thoughts?
Has to look at, I've always looked at how is time used best? And if indeed the return on the investment of the additional 2 days is such that you believe that it has been beneficial to do it, then you sustain that policy. If you have question and believe that using those 2 days in a different fashion by rolling it back, then that drives your decision. Not the amount of seat time, it's the amount of teaching time.
Correct.
Mr. Reidinger.
But it's also the quality of teaching. And if you have kids who are not on target and you have teachers who are burnout, the quality of teaching won't be as good. So you could be there longer, but maybe learning less.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got a lot of feedback on the calendar. I think the two issues that came up the most regularly, one we have not yet talked about, and that is there was a general desire among people that I spoke to try and cluster the days off in February so that, you didn't have no full weeks essentially, so that you instead could have like one long weekend so that perhaps families could take extended trips. The second one really relates to what we have been talking about, which is the school that, well, I'm not going as far this year or next year as it does this year or last year. I have to say, in my experience, that last week returns almost zero value in terms of instruction. I've seen my kids watching movies and lots of things. I think as a general matter, after all of the high school kids get their
Instructional movies, though, right?
But all the high school kids have their exams and post-SOL, and it's just, there's a diminishing return for each additional day in June. And as a result, I am strongly disposed to at least roll back to 180 instructional days and get rid of 2 of the days at the end of the year. I personally would love to get rid of those 2 winter break days before that full week off so that we could eliminate that entire last week. But I understand that staff is not fond of that, and so it would be nice if we could find a right compromise that gave staff a reasonable amount of time off at the winter break, because giving the teachers time to recover over winter break is exceedingly important. So if there's whatever we can do to try and shorten the time in June, especially if we can get it back to end at the close of the second week, I think would be very beneficial and have limited adverse effect on instructional matters.
Well, I have a comment and a question. The first is comment. I think there may be about as much value in a late August school day as there is in a mid-June school day. I don't know. When the weather's good, for some reason, instruction seems to be hobbled. So I'm not sure what we can do about that. But I do think, and I have received a lot of feedback, that much of the June time does not at least feel to be well spent. And I think Some of that is a byproduct of when Labor Day hits and then when the winter break hits, and a late Labor Day results in a later June. I do think we've tended to, it would be interesting to see what our last day of school has been for the last 10-ish years or so, and whether it has sort of bleeded out into the later years, later parts of the month. It also has some extremely disruptive consequences for students in high school trying to do summer programs, where I think nearly 36 students were having to take exams early to get to summer programs, which is obviously disruptive for everyone involved. And so I think one of the questions we have to ask ourselves ultimately is, what's the best calendar for making the most of the time that the students get? And do we revisit? I know a lot of people like to start after Labor Day, but do we revisit that? And do we say, as a matter of pedagogy, we need to consider starting before Labor Day and then try to find the waiver that'll get us there? Do we want to compress the school year so that we start earlier, finish earlier, and have fewer gaps in between? I understand winter breaks are nice, but ultimately I think that has to be subordinated to what's best for the children. Ideally, we can find a compromise for both. So those are my comments, and I think, in Mason, in the past couple of years, the late-ish portion of the schedule has actually started really to be counterproductive, and I think some of that is the fault of the seniors who are footloose at that time of year, but I think we need to reel that in a bit. And so that's the comment. The question is, what do we do next if the board wants to do something simple like roll back 2 days of the year? That's one thing. Opening this up again, I assume, is not going to be necessarily easy. So what are our options going forward?
If the board would like for you to do that, I can send it back out to the calendar committee. I don't think you'll get a lot of negative comments for doing that, because it is giving more time back to teachers. But of course, as the assistant superintendent of instruction, I would never want to lose instructional time.
And would that be replaced with professional development time, or how does that work? And would that have budgetary implications?
It would not have budgetary implications in terms of costing more. And if you do roll back the 2 days, there will be budget savings, but it will be for our food service staff and our bus drivers, because they only work the days the students work, so they would see a decrease in their pay.
Increasingly, school districts are front-loading their instruction days to get as many days before testing.
And we have moved testing.
Across the nation in the South, starting as early as August 3, 4, even universities are starting that early. Right.
Start in mid.
Right, because front-loading it then, the start of the school year. Professional development activities as the last 2 days of school, frankly, my experience has been, it's not a great deal of substantial impact, because you then have teachers who are retiring, leaving, and just waiting and sitting it out. But that's a major paradigm shift for when a school district decides, traditionally waiting until after Labor Day, to move it into August. But if you want to maximize instruction, you do it in the front end.
You do the professional days in the front end.
And the instruction in the front end.
Well, but right now, I mean, on the instruction, we don't have the legal option.
That's right.
But we do have a lot of professional days in August.
That's right.
So you're saying, absent being told we can start before Labor Day, push.
Best in the front days. Although, if you don't change the total number of days, I would put them in August instead of professional development, instead of June at the last 2 days.
And just to remind you, or maybe share with you, that the 2 days that are August 24th and 25th, several years ago we added 4 days. Two were teacher days that we said you now come to work, and then 2 were instructional days. So teachers already have a concern and ask about having the 24th and 25th be a flex day where they have done some type of professional development during the summer. And then therefore, if they've done that and can validate that to their administrators, then August 24th right now is a flex day, which means they do not have to report to their building, as well as the June 25th day, if we were not to change anything, would also be a flex day for teachers. So if we were to add professional days to the beginning, we're going to have to talk about whether the flex day, whether it be flex time, or you have to actually be in the building, because that does, infringe upon the vacations that teachers a lot of times go on right before school starts. So there's just a lot to consider.
Mr. Lawrence.
Two things. First, I think watching movies the last day of school isn't a factor of these 2 additional days. It's going to happen any of the last 2 days. So if you've got 182 and you go to 180, then 179 and 180 will be the days they watch the movies. So we're not going to magically eliminate movies the last 2 days of school by doing this. So that's the first thing. The second is a question for Dr. Schiller. How would you evaluate whether those 2 extra days are worthwhile from an instructional standpoint?
Instructionally, it would be...
I mean, that's the only reason to have more instructional days, right?
That's right. How would what direction is given and expectation is held for the teachers of how those 2 days are used? If it's very clear and it's being supervised and enforced that those are pure instructional days and that multimedia events are not substitution for instruction, it's, again, the direction that you give to your building administrators for expectation. The other part is that I guess it comes right down to the fact that, and I'm going to blend my superintendent's report, I've said to you, and I'm saying it in public, the dedication and support and professionalism of your teachers and your principals and your support staff is the highest level I have ever witnessed. I've not been here for the last 2 days of June, but I tell you, when I see what has happened on those days right before Thanksgiving, full steam ahead for instruction. And I would expect when I walk around to the schools on December, was it 21? I'll see that for the most part the same thing. Your teachers are delivering for you. Look at your results. It's pretty hard to demand that kind of effort when many of the kids are checked out in the last day or two in June. I guess bottom line is that you lead this state and a good part of this nation in performance. It's because of what your teachers and your support staff are doing. How important then is that last day? All bets are off, and you've had the tests, and they've exhausted themselves. Trick would be that if you do roll that back, that it doesn't mean that those last 2 days of school before that are double feature days.
Yeah, no, and that's one of my concerns is, if you look at the schedule here, the last week is 3.5 days long. If you eliminate Wednesday, Thursday, honestly, I would take a raffle as to how many kids show up on Monday and Tuesday.
Precisely.
I mean, I understand the idea of frustration at the end, and honestly, having school for another week after graduation still makes my head hurt. But we're concerned about, what the last 2 days are like. We need to figure out what we're going to do about what those last 2 days are, rather than discussing whether they're day 179, 180, or 181 and 182. Because, like you said, if we don't set the requirement and the expectation, we're going to get the same. It's just going to be on a different day.
Yes.
And we're going to make ourselves feel like we did something when, honestly, instructionally, we didn't. We just gave kids 2 more days off.
Yes, Mr. Reitinger.
So, I think Mr. Lawrence raises a good point. Certainly, the last couple of days, whenever they are more difficult. I do think, however, that the farther you get into June, the more difficult things are. especially when you're past graduation, you're past exams, you're past the SOLs, and each additional day is significantly more diminishing returns. I also think that Mr. Lawrence raises a good point, that if you cut 2 days and you have only Monday and Tuesday, that, a lot of people are not going to show up. My preference would quite actually be to say, let's roll back to 180 days and go back to the calendaring committee and ask them if they can come up with a proposal that has us out on the 15th, whatever that happens to involve, or whether that would involve instructional compromises that we don't want to make. I agree very much with Dr. Schiller. We have the most amazing faculty I've ever seen. I think expecting them to get in teenagers to pay attention more than halfway through June is more than I could legitimately ask. So I'd like to, I don't think it's a slam dunk that we ought to do that, but I'd certainly like to ask our instructional leaders to take a look again and say, if we turn a dial here or there, could we end school on the 15th? And by then give everybody, teachers and students, perhaps a little bit more time off or a little bit more planning time.
Other thoughts?
Well, just one question for Lisa. The graduation date, that is largely determined by when the hall is available, right? We
And-
don't purposely do it a week before the end of school, just
That's
for
correct.
fun.
And this time, there is a situation where Constitution Hall is not able to be used during the week of the 18th. Isn't that correct, Marty? So that's what they're working to get everyone in the week of the 11th through the 15th, because they
Right,
have-
yeah, I just wanted to make it clear that, we didn't arbitrarily pick a date that was,
That's correct.
more than a week before the end of school, just to make it that much more annoying for people.
Well, Ms. High, what are the prospects as you size up the week of the 18th of June?
I see there, just quickly looking, I see that we could get back one additional day if January 2nd became a school day. So that gets us to the 19th, so we just have to find one more.
Well, and isn't it's a half day, usually the last day of school, so would that, if we could get them back on the 2nd, which I think would provide a much better return in terms of instructional time if kids are in class on January 2nd than if they're in class on June 19th. If the last day is going to be a half day anyway, so it'd be the 18th, can we get that back on like a half day Wednesday that we don't have? So then the teachers actually, if they don't get that half day Wednesday, they get a full week off of school? They get the entire third week of June off?
How does that?
I mean, if we're
I don't
doing
know
it
that
on
that
an
would be
hours-based
considered-
system, I don't, that's-
We wouldn't be able to count it as the
gets into-
180th day, though. Because even
Yeah.
if we go to school on an early release day,
Okay.
you wouldn't be able to count that as 2 days.
Or don't we do, it's an hours-based, I don't really understand
We
the
do-
hours-based thing, so,
We do count based on the 990 hours, but the state requires us to have students in school 180
180 days. So we still need to find, so like maybe the 21st or something, or,
But a half day equals a day?
Yes, in the count, yes.
oh, so that doesn't, okay. But I wouldn't, I agree with wholeheartedly with Mr. Reidinger. I would like to see the kids out on the 15th. I think that, adding back days during the school year rather than at the end of June will get us, to Dr. Schiller's point, will get more instructional time for the kids. And also give our teachers a break. Giving them those 2 days back for professional development or other time, I think is really worthwhile. Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, I think another option might be a half day. Dr. Schiller points out a half day on the 21st of December for, early release. You could release people then. Well, but as long as, but anyway, you work your magic, but I think Mr. Lawrence and Mr. Reidinger are right that a couple of days in the week of June 18th is kind of counterproductive, and let's try to stop on the 15th. How long, I don't think we're going to revisit this until the new year. Will that be enough time for you to socialize that?
Yeah, we can put an email together to.
Okay.
This week.
All right. Yeah, all right. So, future agenda topics. This is a time, Dr. Schiller, where board members propose items to fill our otherwise empty schedule with things to talk about. Mr. Ankuma.
I had an epiphany the other day driving from Richmond when I got an email from Marty saying there was yet another meeting. And I think I called Ms. Gill and I said, I'm having meeting fatigue. This year has been just absolutely nonstop, or should I say the last couple of years. Is there any way we can cut down on the number of meetings? I would rather the meetings were more productive and longer, but the number is just absolutely ridiculous.
So you're proposing a meeting to talk about less meetings?
No, I am proposing that whatever we do, especially next year going forward, can we find a way to make sure that the meetings are productive, but they're fewer?
And I agree. And you know, people don't realize that in addition to all the school board and then the school board city council meetings, we have our liaison meetings. And I mean, I usually have back-to-back meetings. Last night I was at Boosters. Tonight I'm here. You know, 3 hours last night, 3 hours, 4 hours tonight, whatever. You know, it takes a toll on a person. And truthfully, and then, you know, and then there's some months where I might have 3 meetings in a row because then there'll be an ESOL meeting as well. And it's difficult. And you all know I get tired by now. I can't believe I'm still speaking. If there's any way we could even start the meetings earlier, I think we might even be more productive and maybe get less grumpy. So.
Okay, well, I think that's always worthwhile to meet no more often than we have to and to do so efficiently. So I think we can definitely endeavor to do that. I don't think anybody on the board would be opposed to meeting less often than we have to, for less time than we have to. So Dr. Schiller, with your fresh perspective, if you have any suggestions as we go forward, by all means, feel free to suggest them, and we can have a discussion as a board, briefly, I hope, as to how we can improve that. Other thoughts? Mr. Reidinger.
Of course, very difficult to follow up Michael and Margaret's comments with a suggestion for something we ought to talk about. But I did want to raise that I think we should return to the question of the principal review of publications before they are distributed. In particular, the LASSO, what Ms. Karstens, the editor, refers to as the prior review question. Obviously, it's a complicated question. I've done some work on it recently. I know that the state of Maryland, as Ms. Karsten said, has now statutorily said there is no prior review. I know there's a complicated set of legal questions we would need to look at, but I think that is something that we, and I've raised this before, but I think it's something that we ought to turn to and schedule relatively soon to decide what we as a board think about the question of allowing considerably more freedom of the press, if you will, when it's the student press, especially at the high school level. And I'm not wedded to any particular view there. I just think it would be an informative discussion for us to have, also with the advice of counsel, to decide if there's a path forward and a change that we would want to make. Because having had the issue raised by the LASSO staff itself and the degree of passion they've shown behind it, I'd like to actually turn to it and have a discussion if we have the time.
And I had a brief discussion with Ms. Minson. Oh, is she no longer?
She's gone.
Okay, so she is working on it.
Yeah,
And I think she did some preliminary investigation of it and realizes that it is a meaty issue. She is working on it. It is at the top of her list of things to do. So we could meet on the 27th to discuss this. That's a joke. So I think sometime in January, we should be able to address that.
I just wanted to, I agree with you, Phil. I would like to address this sooner rather than later. I'd like to see it before Kate graduates. I'd like to see this issue addressed before she finishes school. And I know that Ms. Minson's also, she said she was working on it. And so I think we have to wait until she gets her research done, I think, before we can actually discuss it intelligently, because we want to have all the facts in front of us first.
Other items? All right, seeing none, I will move ahead to the superintendent's report. Dr. Schiller, welcome.
Thank you. One, it's an honor to serve you. I mean that. Being here is a tremendous opportunity for me to witness outstanding public education taking place by dedicated people. I sense your frustration around here because for me, being here such a short period of time, I find it amazing that matters can be kicked and pushed along the road without resolution when the clock is ticking and there are so many moving forces that could come to bear. I'm hopeful that the way we're moving ahead aggressively and preparing the budget that information that you want, that when you tell us it's time to do it, we are ready to go forward and maybe then cut down on some of your other meetings on the budget because you have to make some tough decisions early on, up front. You're at a particularly difficult time. You're doing a search. You're looking for an interim. You've got a budget coming up. You're having the joint meetings with the city.
General government.
General government. I keep saying that wrong. You know, and you're meeting out. I think I would just suggest as your interim is to focus on the big stuff. Big decisions. That's where you need to put your time. And prioritize where you want to put the rest of your time going forward so we can have compact meetings of substance and where decisions are being driven. Then you walk away from the meeting feeling as though we have accomplished something. We're not spinning it over. So all I'm saying is that you have a marvelous school system. We need to celebrate that. But we also have to, as the policy board, you need to make some tough decisions very soon so you can go on. Budget, you know, trying to build the coalition of folks to be fully engaged and fully informed. Telling them that this board recognizes it owns the budget and is ready to make some very hard decisions in very difficult, limited resources at hand. I think they're starting to understand that. Matter of the high school. I don't know how to cut down on your meetings except maybe focus 90%, you know, all of your time on the real big issues. And get them off the table, one way or the other. Just can't begin to tell you of what potential you have to even be greater than what you are. And I can't say that about a lot of public school systems. The quality of this board, the passion of this board is absolutely amazing. The dedication of this board. You set the tone for how the school leadership responds. That's unheard of. You're bickering. I hear honest exchange of honest opinion and ideas. You're all wanting to do the right thing. Those are kudos to you. The time you put in and the fact that you're so focused on wanting to do the right things and you're so passionate about it. Yes, that's why you get the big bucks as board members.
All right, thank you, Dr. Schiller, and I suppose it's a testament to you that it feels as if you've been here a long time already. So, I mean that in a good way. I mean that in a good way. All right.
I'm appreciative of the cot that you've provided me as my place of residence in the office.
No extra charge for that, too. All right. Now it's time for school board and student liaison comments. Sorry?
We just do them next week.
We could do them next week, or we could have no comments. Your call. Very well, then. Unless somebody's dying too. We have student enrollment numbers for you to look at. We're up 2 over last time. And With that, it is 10:26, and we will adjourn. Thank you very much for your attendance
Nice
tonight.
time was had by all.